Chapter 1 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Maria Therese. Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. BRENNAN. Chapter 1. The Brass Ring. Last week I went down to Seneca Park. Of course, I visited the zoo and saw the elephants, the bears, the wildcats, and the tigers. I spent some time watching the monkeys, and they gave me lots of laughs. So, if you want to have some fun, just go down to Seneca Park. It's worth the trip and you won't be disappointed. Now, don't get the idea that I spent all my time at the zoo. Oh, no! After watching the animals for some time, where do you think I went? I went over to the merry-go-round, because I like merry-go-rounds. No, I didn't go for a ride, but I did watch the boys and girls, and they were having plenty of fun. Some of the children rode galloping horses, and others rode camels and tigers. While the music played, the children raced around and around in a circle. They smiled, they waved, they hollered. Yes, the children were certainly happy, and they were having a grand time. Children who ride on the merry-go-round try to catch the brass ring. You know, with some merry-go-rounds there is a long wooden arm fixed to a post. This wooden arm is filled with rings about the size of a $50. On the end of the wooden arm there is a slot that holds one of the rings, and as the children ride past the wooden arm, they reach for the slot and catch a ring. Now the rings are iron rings, all except one. That one is a brass ring. And here's the good news. Whoever catches the brass ring gets a free ride on the merry-go-round. The iron rings are not good for anything, but the brass one gives you a free ride. Only one person gets a free ride, and very seldom does the same person get the brass ring more than once. I watched the children on the merry-go-round for a long time. They all tried to catch the brass ring, but only one caught it on each ride. During the past few days, I've thought about that merry-go-round several times. You know, no matter how fast you ride on a merry-go-round, and no matter how long you stay on it, you never get any place. Isn't that right? Yes, and there's something else you should know about merry-go-rounds. If you want to ride, most of the time you have to pay 6 cents. Now and then you may get a free ride, but most of the time you have to pay. The brass ring gives only one free ride. The brass ring is never good for life. It's not even good for one afternoon. Do you know that some people think that life is a merry-go-round? They say that we are not going any place, but you and I know that we are. We're trying to save our souls so that we can get to heaven. That's why God made us. Now, you can't save your soul or get into heaven by catching a brass ring. Oh, no! There are no free rides in heaven. If you want to go to heaven, you have to work. You have to pray. You must go to Mass, receive the sacraments often, and keep God's laws. You have to do all these things. So don't ever get the idea that you'll get to heaven by sitting around and waiting to catch a brass ring. Heaven is a prize, a reward, and you have to work for that reward. You can't earn heaven easily. You have to work for heaven every day. Some of your little friends may have the wrong idea about heaven. Perhaps they miss Mass. They may even laugh at you when you tell them that you are going to receive Holy Communion. They may make fun of you when you are trying to be good. They may tell you that God is too good to send anybody to hell. Well, if your friends talk like that, don't listen to them. Maybe they don't know better, but you know what is right. You know that you have to work for heaven. There is only one way by which you can save your soul. You must know God, you must love God, and you must serve Him. Do you know how you can be absolutely certain of going to heaven? Just do this. Try to do as many good things every day as you possibly can. Say lots of prayers every day. Obey your parents and teachers. Try to be kind. Keep your speech clean. Oh, there are so many good things that you can do. Do them and do them every day. Don't forget that every time you do something good, you earn grace for your soul, and grace will buy your way into heaven. Children, all through life you'll find people trying to get a free ride to heaven. Remember, there are no free rides. You must work for heaven. You must pay your way. You can't get into heaven on a brass ring. End of chapter 1. Chapter 2 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 2. The Star Counter. Marian Wilson was 8 years old and in the 3rd grade. She liked school and she was a very good pupil. Of course, her parents were very much interested in the little girl. They encouraged her and tried to help her. Every night after supper, Marian's father helped her with her lessons. When the lessons were finished, the father usually told a story, and Marian loved her father's stories. When the weather was good, Marian and her father often went for a walk. Marian liked those walks because she felt that walking with her father was grand fun. Well, one night Marian happened to look up at the sky. Oh, the sky was beautiful. The great big moon seemed to smile and wink at the little girl, and Marian smiled and winked right back. And the stars! Why, the sky was dotted with stars, big stars and little stars, all twinkling and lighting up the sky. Never before had Marian seen so many stars, so many beautiful stars. "Father," said the youngster all excited, "I've got an idea. I think I'll count the stars." "All right, Marian," answered the father. "Go right ahead." The father held the little girl's hand, and for some time neither spoke a word. Then Marian began to count out loud, 55, 56, 57. Then the little girl stopped. "Daddy," she sighed, "I had no idea there were so many stars." Late that evening, when Marian was sound asleep, her father sat in his big easy chair, thinking. He thought about his little girl counting the stars and what she had said. Marian had no idea there were so many stars. Then the father began to count. Oh, he didn't count stars, but he counted all the good things he had received from God. 22, 23, 24. Then the father stopped. He raised his head, looked at the crucifix hanging on the wall, and whispered, "Lord, I had no idea there were so many." Yes, Marian's father had his eyes opened. Day after day God had been giving him many things, and he never realized how good God had been to him. It was only when the father began to count his blessings that he saw how much God loved him. And was he surprised? Why, it was the biggest surprise of his life. He had no idea that he had received so many blessings. Now, children, there's an idea for you. If you want to know how much God loves you and how good He has been to you, just sit down some day and count all your blessings. Count all the good things that God has given to you. Will you be surprised? Well, you certainly will be surprised, and you will have your eyes opened. Let's do some counting right now. What are some of the blessings that you have received from God? Let's name some of those blessings. Well, there's your health, and that's a mighty big blessing. Your mother and father are blessings. Can you imagine how hard it would be to live without your father and mother? Your home, your food, your clothing are blessings. Think of all the blessings you receive because you are Catholics. You can go to Mass, go to confession, receive Holy Communion. These are blessings that are not given to every boy and girl. They are given to you because you are God's special friends. Oh, children, we could go on and on counting our blessings. God has been giving you some of these blessings ever since you were born. Perhaps you never thought about them before, but now that you know them, you must say that God is very good. As you count your blessings, children, I know that you will be surprised. But don't forget to say thanks to God for them. You should thank Him every day. God certainly takes very good care of you. He is very generous. If God is so good and kind, you ought to tell Him that you are grateful. After all, if you never thank God, how can you expect Him to keep on giving? Boys and girls, I'd like to be around someday when you count your blessings. I'll bet that you'll find more blessings than you'll find stars in the heavens. After you make out your list of blessings, I know just what you are going to say. Lord, I had no idea there were so many. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 3 The Boy in the Storm. How would you like to take a trip across the ocean? Well, I know a little boy who made just such a trip. Bobby Burns was only 11 years old and in the 6th grade when he made his first trip across the ocean. It seems that, one day, Bobby's father made a promise. The father promised the boy that, if he would work hard and pass all of his examinations, he would take Bobby on a trip to Europe. Well, I don't have to tell you that Bobby worked hard, in school, and studied every night. Yes, Bobby passed his examinations. He passed every one of them with very high marks. And, of course, Bobby was happy. Now, I suppose you are wondering whether Bobby's father kept his promise. He certainly did. The boy and his father sailed from New York on the 2nd of July, and Bobby Burns was the happiest boy in the world. Bobby spent the first day roaming about the great ship. And was he excited? There were so many things to see. The elevators, the swimming pool, the toy shop, the moving picture theater, the game room, the library. Why, that first day was one of the greatest days in Bobby's life. He could hardly believe that there were so many wonderful things on a ship. It was just like a dream. The second day Bobby had lots of fun. He swam in the pool, played games on the deck, and even won a prize. He listened to the music and watched the people dance. He went to the children's party and ate 3 dishes of ice cream and plenty of chocolate cake. Boy, he had the time of his life. And that isn't all. That night Bobby and his father went to the movies, and they didn't have to pay. Then and there, Bobby decided that he was going to be a sailor. Living on a ship was just the life he wanted. But the third day! Oh, things were different the third day. When Bobby awoke, the great ship was tossing and rolling. There must be a storm, said Bobby to himself as he jumped out of bed and began to dress. Suddenly, the great ship seemed to tremble and shake. Then she dove forward, and Bobby fell to the floor. This is a storm, all right, and it must be a big one, he thought. Bobby was excited, but he was not afraid. Bobby went to the dining room for breakfast, and he found very few people at the tables. "You are a brave boy to be up this morning," said the waiter as he served the boys breakfast. "This is the worst storm that we have had in years." Bobby smiled. Now he would have something to tell his friends when he went back home. Bobby didn't want to miss anything. He wanted to watch the storm, the angry sea, the high waves. So, after breakfast, the little boy went up on the deck. And what a surprise! The ship was dark, the thunder roared, and the lightning flashed. Bobby held tightly to the guardrail and watched the giant waves rise and fall. At times, the great ship seemed to stand still, and, then again, she plunged into a deep hole. It was all very exciting, and Bobby enjoyed the excitement. The boy watched the storm for about 5 minutes. He was about to go inside when a sailor came up to him. "What are you doing out here, Sonny?" asked the sailor. "Aren't you afraid?" "Afraid?" answered Bobby. "Of course not. My father is the captain of this ship." Boys and girls, do you know that you are just like Bobby? You too are making a trip. You are making a trip to heaven, and each day brings you closer to home. Now you know that the sun doesn't shine every day. At times things go wrong and you run into storms. The devil tempts you and tries to lead you into sin. You get sick or have an accident. You find your work in school very hard, or you fail to pass your examination. Someone lies about you, or you are punished for something that you did not do. All these things are the storms that upset you. Well, when these storms come, just remember that God is in heaven. Like Bobby, you must trust God, your Father, who watches over you and protects you. God sees everything, and God knows everything. God is your captain, and, if you trust Him, He will bring you safely through the storms. When things go wrong, don't ever get the idea that God has gone back on you. Don't get the idea that God doesn't like you or that He is angry with you. God doesn't work that way. You are God's children, and He loves every one of you. That's why He made you, and that's why He died for you. So when things get black, put your trust in God. Pray to Him. Ask His help. I know that God will hear your prayers, and He will never let any harm come to you. Remember that. Children, God is your Father. He is the captain of your soul. Believe in Him. Hope in Him. Love Him. Put your trust in God at all times. Then when temptations come or things go wrong, you need never be afraid. Like Bobby, you, too, can stand up and say, "Afraid? Of course not. My Father is the captain of this ship." End of chapter 3. Chapter 4 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 4. Michael the Scrapper. This morning I want to tell you about an old priest friend of mine. This priest was a great traveler. He crossed the ocean several times and saw many wonderful things. He visited Ireland, England, France, Germany, Belgium, Holland, and all the other countries of Europe. He was blessed by the Pope and once saw the King of England. Why, this priest knew the countries of Europe better than most of us know the United States. While on one of these trips to Europe, this priest saw something very interesting in the town of Augsburg in Bavaria. It was the 29th day of September, and this day, you know, is the feast day of the great St. Michael. People came from far and near and gathered in the square. Why did they come? They came to look at a clock, the 400-year-old clock on the city hall, one of the most wonderful clocks in the whole world. Just before noon the square was crowded with men, women, and children. As the hands of the clock moved toward noon, there was silence in the square. Every eye was on the clock. Everyone waited and everyone wondered. The big hand moved closer to the smaller one. Then, just a few seconds before noon, a window above the clock opened, and there, standing in the window, with a large sword in his hand, was the figure of St. Michael. At his feet was the devil. Suddenly the clock struck, and the first time it struck, St. Michael sunk his sword into the devil's body. Of course, that was just what the crowd wanted. They yelled and clapped their hands. Again the clock struck, and again St. Michael stabbed the devil with his sword, while the crowd yelled with delight. 12 times the clock struck, and 12 times St. Michael dug his sword into the devil's body. At the last stroke of the clock, the crowd went wild. They yelled and cheered because St. Michael was a hero. St. Michael was a winner. St. Michael had conquered the devil. Then the figures of St. Michael and the devil disappeared. The window closed and the show was over. The people went back to their homes. They were happy, satisfied, and contented. St. Michael had won his fight. The devil had lost. Children, I'd like to think that each one of you is another St. Michael. Oh, I don't mean that I want you to go around carrying a sword, and I don't want you to be using your fists all the time, either. No, no. But I do want you to fight the devil, and God wants you to fight him too. God wants you not only to fight the devil, but God wants you to lick him. You know that the devil lives in hell. Well, don't get the idea that the devil spends all of his time in hell. He spends most of his time trying to get other people into hell. The devil wants you in hell. So what does he do? He goes around tempting you and trying to lead you into sin. Why, the devil tempts you every day. So you have to be on your guard. You have to be ready to fight the devil at all times. Remember, when the devil tempts you, you have to get rough with him. You must lick him, because you can't afford to lose. Of course, when the devil tempts you, you can't stab him with a sword. But do you know what you can do? You can pray. Prayer is the best sword you can use against the devil. He hates prayer. He's afraid of prayer. When you pray in time of temptation, every prayer is a stab at the devil, and prayer will lick him every time. So when the devil tempts you to do wrong, don't get nervous or excited. Just pray and keep on praying. If you do that, you'll find that the devil will stop bothering you, and he will stop quickly. However, the devil never gives up. He never stops fighting. He keeps coming back. You may lick him and his temptations this morning, and in a little while he may come right back and bother you again. The devil tries to tire you out, although he never gets tired himself. The devil may bother you several times a day, but don't let that worry you. Just say those prayers every time he comes around, and then you won't fall into sin. Children, St. Michael was a scrapper who won his fight against the devil. Ask St. Michael to help you in your scraps against the devil. Tell St. Michael that you want to be a scrapper, that you want to be on his side, that you want to win your fights against the devil. If you lick every temptation, then someday, like St. Michael, you too will be in heaven. End of chapter 4. Chapter 5 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 5. Maxie the Mouse. Maxie the Mouse was no ordinary field mouse, nor was he a common kitchen mouse. Maxie was a royal mouse, because he lived in a king's castle. Night after night Maxie played on the king's soft rugs and slept in the king's large easy chairs. He loved his home, and he knew that he was very lucky. Whenever Maxie thought about his friends living in cellars and barns, he felt sorry for them. He became, therefore, very proud, and felt that he was much better than ordinary mice. After all, Maxie lived in a castle. He was a royal mouse. Whenever Maxie roamed about the castle at night, he tiptoed over the carpets and was always careful going around corners. However, Maxie was never afraid. He liked the dark because that was the best time to steal the queen's candy and cookies. He took lots of chances in his search for food, but he was never afraid of danger. As he became older, little Maxie became very bold. Why, one night he even climbed the castle stairs and visited the rooms on the second floor. Of course, he couldn't see very much in the dark, but when morning came and he saw all the fine rooms, he decided to stay right there on the second floor. Now, Maxie had one good habit. Being a little mouse, he always took a nap in the afternoon. But what do you think he did? One day he took his nap in the queen's bed, right up on the soft white pillow. Well, Maxie was just in the middle of a dream, dreaming that he was eating crackers and cheese, when he was awakened by a loud scream. The queen had discovered him. Maxie jumped off the pillow, ran down the hall, and hid in a shoe, far away from the angry queen. While Maxie was hiding, he did some thinking. "That queen doesn't like me," he said to himself. "I'm going to keep away from her." After some time, the little mouse climbed out of the shoe. "This looks like one of the servants' rooms," he whispered to himself. "I think I'll stay right here." Late that night, little Maxie sniffed and snuffed. Yes, he did smell candy. So, coming out from his hiding place, he walked across the room, and sure enough, resting on the floor beside a chair, he found a box of chocolates. The box was open, and Maxie crawled into the box. Boy, oh boy, did little Maxie have a feast. He ate so much candy that finally his stomach began to ache. "That's enough for tonight," he said to himself, as he hurried back to his hiding place in the lady's shoe. The next night there was no candy, but there was something else. The servant had placed on the floor 3 salted peanuts, a dish of honey, and a small white pill. Maxie ate the peanuts and lapped up the honey. Then No, he didn't. He didn't touch the pill. Maxie was wise. He felt that there was poison in that pill. And, of course, there was. The next night little Maxie had another feast. There were more peanuts, more honey, and the same white pill. He ate the peanuts, lapped up the honey, but he didn't touch the pill. As he crawled into his shoe, he almost laughed out loud at the servant who tried to catch him. Things were different the next night. There were no peanuts, no honey, no little white pill, and Maxie wondered. "Oh, I'm just like old Mother Hubbard," he cried, and the tiny tears ran down his cheeks. "I'm very hungry and there's nothing to eat." But there was something to eat. Under the bed there was a small trap, and in the trap was a large piece of cheese. Maxie smiled when he caught the odor of cheese. He hurried across the room and ran under the bed. It was all over in a moment. The trap sprang, and that was the end of Maxie, the proud little mouse that lived in the castle. Poor little Maxie! He was bold, proud, brave, and not afraid of danger. He laughed at danger even when he was very close to it. He was always certain that he would never get caught. It took a long time, but he did get caught. A piece of cheese was his downfall. A piece of cheese brought death to the little mouse. Many boys and girls are just like Maxie. They are bold, proud, and brave. They say that they are not afraid of the devil. Oh, the devil will never catch them. The devil will never lead them into sin. Then what happens? Some day, when they are not on guard, the devil does catch them. The devil leads them into a trap, and they fall into sin. Children, look out for the devil. He's a sly fellow and works 24 hours a day. He wants your soul, and he wants to lead you away from God. He's always on the job throwing temptations your way, telling you to skip your prayers, whispering to you to miss Mass, begging you to keep away from confession and Holy Communion. So be careful. When the devil tempts you, pray hard, and then you won't get caught in his trap. Sometimes the devil takes a long time trying to catch you. As long as you live, the devil will be after you. Have nothing to do with him. When you are tempted, pray, and then you won't sin. Don't get caught in the devil's trap. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 6. The Boy and the Balloons. I suppose most of you boys and girls have seen a circus. Well, I know a boy who never saw a circus. Yes, Frank Murphy lived in a small town. He had heard about acrobats, clowns, elephants, dancing bears, and all the other things in a circus, but he had never seen a circus until last summer. And was he excited when he heard that a real honest-to-goodness circus was coming to town? Then and there, Frank decided that he was going to see the great show. The boys worked at odd jobs and saved his money. For days and days they talked about the circus, dreamed about the circus, and wondered about the circus. Frank could hardly wait for the great day. Circus day finally came, and that was a big day in Frank's life. Bright and early, Frank was at the circus grounds, watching the men unload the big trucks and put up their giant tents. He saw wild animals in cages, lions, tigers, and bears. He saw elephants, camels, horses, zebras, and monkeys. Why, Frank saw so many wonderful things that his eyes almost popped out of his head. I don't have to tell you that Frank was right on the job for the circus parade. He laughed at the clowns, admired the beautiful horses, and clapped for the band. He was so thrilled that he even forgot to go home for dinner. He followed the parade back to the circus grounds and waited for the great tent to open. Frank wasn't going to miss anything because this was his first circus. While he was waiting for the tent to open, Frank watched a man making pink lemonade. He saw other men popping corn and cooking hot dogs. Then he saw a man selling toy balloons. Frank had never seen such big balloons, and they were all colors: red balloons, green balloons, blue balloons, white balloons, yellow balloons, black balloons. Frank watched the man with the balloons for some time, and, after a while, what do you think happened? One of the green balloons broke away and began to rise in the air. Frank watched the green balloon go higher and higher, and finally he saw the green balloon disappear. Frank was excited, and he began to wonder. "Say, mister," he asked after a few moments, "could a red balloon go as high as that green one?" The man with the balloons seemed surprised at the question. "Sure, sonny," he answered. and he smiled at the little boy. "Well, what about a white balloon?" asked the boy again. "Could a white balloon go as high as that green one?" The man smiled again. "Yes, little boy, a white balloon could go just as high as that green one." Frank was glad to hear that, but he had one more question. "Do you think a black balloon could go as high as that green one?" The man with the balloons looked down at the little boy and nodded his head. "Boy," he said, "it isn't the color of the balloon that makes it rise. It's the stuff inside." Now, Frank Murphy learned something important from that man at the circus. He learned that it is not the color of the balloon that counts. It's the stuff inside. Now, I'd like you boys and girls to learn something else that is very important. Every day you meet boys and girls. You play with them. You go to school with them. You have them for your friends. Like the balloons, all children are different. Some are short and others are tall. Some have black hair, brown hair, red hair, blonde hair. Some have freckles and others have dimples. All children have eyes, ears, a nose, and a mouth. Yet all children are different. It seems as though no two children are alike. Why, even the color of the skin of some children is different. Your skin is white, but I have seen little Indian children with red skin. I know children who have black skin. In China, the children have yellow skin. Yes, there are millions of children in this great world, and they all seem to be different. All children may look different on the outside, but do you know that all children look alike on the inside? Yes, that's true. Inside of every boy and girl, God has placed a soul, and all souls look alike, because all souls look like God. So, it's not the color of your skin that counts. It's your soul that counts. It's the stuff inside the balloon that is important, and it's the soul inside you that makes you important and precious. Your soul will live forever. Thousands and thousands of years after you die, your soul will still be alive. Your soul will be living in either heaven or hell. You don't want your soul to go to hell. You want your soul to go to heaven. And your soul will go to heaven if you say your prayers, go to Mass, go to confession, and receive Holy Communion often, and keep God's laws. It's the stuff inside the balloons that counts. It's the soul inside your body that counts with God. Your soul is more important than your body. Your soul is the most important part of you, so take good care of it. Remember that, and don't forget it. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 7. Finny the Fish. Finny was a green and yellow fish that lived with his family in a cool mountain brook. Finny was the youngest member of the family, and for that reason his mother loved him very much. She taught him how to swim and play, and, when it rained, she showed him how to hide under the big rocks. She taught Finny everything that a good little fish should know. One day the mother called Finny aside. "I must warn you," she said, "about a great danger. People will try to catch you with hooks and bait. Now don't rush after everything that shines, or things that look like worms. If you do, you may get caught and you'll end up in somebody's frying pan." Finny thanked his mother for the good advice. He promised to be very careful. Well, Finny was careful, and time again he saw worms and shining hooks dangling in the water and refused to touch them. He laughed at the boys and men who tried to catch him. Finny was a smart fish. He was certain that he'd never get caught. Finny grew up to be quite a fish. In fact, he weighed over 3 pounds. So he was quite a fellow. Finny spent most of his time close to home and his family, but once in a while he stole away for a long swim. Of course, whenever Finny went off alone, his parents worried, but Finny always came back. Did I say that Finny always came back? Well, there was one time when Finny did not come back. No, Finny didn't get lost, but he did get into serious trouble. What happened? Listen. It was a bright, sunny day, and very quiet and peaceful in the mountain brook. Finny decided to take a long swim. Well, he swam and swam far away from home. He swam into strange waters, and that's where he made his terrible mistake. Suddenly Finny saw something red and white dash through the water before him. Without thinking, Finny raced through the water and snapped the object with his open mouth. Yes, Finny caught the object, and that's the sad part of this story. In an instant he felt a sharp hook pass through his mouth. Finny was caught. He fought hard to get away, but the hook was too strong. Finny couldn't get away from the terrible hook. I suppose you know the rest of the story. Yes, that noon, Finny, buried in flour, lay on a frying pan over a hot fire. That was the sad, sad ending of Finny the fish. I suppose you think Finny was a very foolish fish. Well, he was. Imagine a fish biting a piece of colored wood and getting caught. Finny may have been a foolish fish, but do you know that some boys and girls are just as foolish? They see something bright and shining to the eye, and like foolish fish, they rush after it and take it just like a fish takes bait. Life is full of baits for boys and girls. There are certain persons, certain places, certain things that lead you into sin. These persons, places, and things may shine before your eyes, but they are just like the fisherman's bait. The devil holds these persons, places, and things before you to tempt you. If you grab them, you will fall into sin. We call these baits of the devil the occasions of sin. Finny was fooled by the shining object, and he got caught. That's where you can learn a lesson. Don't be fooled by a person's looks. Boys and girls may wear fine clothes, but clothes don't make them good. If a person has bad habits, keep away from him, because you don't want to get caught. Keep away, too, from places of sin, places where you may see or hear evil, places where bad boys or bad girls meet. Keep away from theaters where they have bad shows or bad movies. If you go to these places of sin, you are chasing the devil's bait. If you go to these bad places, you may get caught and you may fall into sin. There are things, too, that will lead you into sin. Bad books, dirty pictures, bad movies, dirty stories, unclean songs. Children, you must be on your guard. Remember, very often dirty books have lovely colors. Beautiful theaters don't always have clean shows or good movies. The devil, children, is a foxy fellow. Sometimes when he wants to lead you into sin, he tries to catch you with strange bait. Keep away from the occasions of sin, persons, places, and things that will lead you into sin. Don't be like Finny. Don't get caught. End of chapter 7. Chapter 8 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 8. I Want My Mother. Little 5-year-old Loretta Benson and her mother are very good friends. In fact, they spend most of their time together. Although Loretta is only a little girl, still she does a great deal to help her mother. She dusts chairs and tables, dries the dishes, and even helps her mother make the beds. Loretta likes to help because she feels then that she is a very big girl. Now, don't get the idea that Loretta spends all of her time working. She likes to play, too. Like all little girls, she plays with her dolls, her dishes, and her other toys. Yes, and she even reads picture books all by herself. Best of all, however, Loretta likes to be with her mother. She loves her mother, and, of course, the mother loves the little girl. That's why they are such good friends. Wait until I tell you what happened last Sunday morning. Loretta woke up earlier than usual. She called to her mother, but her mother didn't answer. Then the girl called again, and again there was no answer. I wonder why Mother doesn't answer, the little girl asked herself. She certainly must be tired this morning. Loretta waited a while, and then she called her mother again. But Loretta's mother didn't answer. The girl called her father, and her father didn't answer. That made the girl wonder some more. "Why don't they answer?" she asked again as she jumped out of bed and ran to her parents' room. And was Loretta surprised? When she reached her parents' room, her mother and father were not there. The little girl hurried downstairs. She ran through the parlor, the dining room, and the kitchen, calling at the top of her voice. But no one answered. Loretta was alone, all alone in the big house. Oh, how she cried! The girl was afraid, and she wanted her mother. I suppose you, too, are wondering about the little girl's parents. Well, Loretta's mother and father had gone to the nearby church. The church was crowded, and the people listened to every word the priest spoke. All of a sudden, someone knocked on the side door of the church. A few people looked toward the door, but the priest kept talking. In a few moments there was another knock, and the priest kept talking. Finally there was a real hard knock, and someone shook the handle of the door. The priest stopped talking, and every head turned toward the door. An old man walked to the door and opened it. And was the man surprised? There in the doorway stood a little girl with tears in her eyes. The girl was Loretta Benson. Loretta looked at the man for a moment. Then she rushed into the church and screamed at the top of her voice, "I want my mother! I want my mother!" Some of the people smiled, but there were tears in the mother's eyes as she hurried to her child. Was Loretta happy when she saw her mother? I think you know the answer. Children, that story is a true story. It really happened. When a priest told me that story, do you know what I thought? I thought about our mother, the Blessed Virgin Mary. And I thought, too, that if we would love Mary as much as Loretta loves her mother, we would be the happiest people in the world. Mary loves every one of us, but do we love Mary? If we don't love Mary, then there's something wrong with us, because every child loves his mother. Boys and girls, you need your mother, Mary. You need her love, her protection, and her care. Mary will help you to keep away from sin, and she will help you to save your soul, too. Remember, Mary's Son died for you to make it easy for you to get to heaven. Mary, like Jesus, wants you to get to heaven, and she wants to help you. That's why you should pray to her. That's why you should pray to Mary every day. If Mary and you are not close friends right now, it's not Mary's fault. Mary hasn't run away from you, but you have run away from Mary. You haven't been praying to her lately, and that's why you are not friends. You know how good Mary has been to thousands and thousands of boys and girls. Well, she wants to be good to you, too. Mary can get anything you want from Jesus, but you have to tell her what you want. You've got to pray to her. Jesus gives his best gifts to Mary, and if you ask for them, Mary will see that you get them. I'd like to think that every boy and girl in this church loves Mary. Keep close to Mary and don't let her get away from you. Pray to her every day. You know, Mary gets all of her friends into heaven. If you pray to her now, then you can be sure that you'll be very close to her in heaven. Some day you are going to walk up to the gates of heaven. If you have been one of Mary's friends, you'll knock on the gates and say to St. Peter, "I want my mother." What will St. Peter do? He will smile as he opens the gates. Then Peter will take you to Mary, and you'll be happy with her forever and ever. End of chapter 8. Chapter 9 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 9. The Greatest Thing in the World. Most of you children have been confirmed. You have received the sacrament of confirmation, and you have received the Holy Ghost. The day you received the sacrament of confirmation was one of the most important days of your life. You remember everything that happened. You remember that the bishop came to our church. You remember what the bishop said. You remember what the bishop did. Well, last Sunday I saw some boys and girls receive the sacrament of confirmation in another church. It was a grand class, and the parish priest was very proud of his children. I think the bishop liked the class too, because after benediction, the bishop did something unusual. He spoke to the children a second time. "Boys and girls," said the bishop, "you have done very well, and I would like to reward you. Each one of you deserves a prize, but I have no prizes. However, I have something very precious, my rosary. I'll give my rosary to the boy or girl who will give me the best answer to a question." Every eye was on the bishop. Every child wondered what the question would be. Every boy and girl hoped to have the right answer. The bishop waited for a moment and then spoke very slowly. "Here is my question," he said. "What was the greatest thing that ever happened in this world?" Every boy and girl began to think. The bishop smiled while he waited for an answer. A little girl was the first one to raise her hand. The bishop nodded his head, and the girl stood up. "The greatest thing that ever happened in this world," she said, "was the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus." "That was a good answer," said the bishop. "Now let's see what the other boys and girls think." A boy was the next one to answer the bishop's question. "I think," said the boy, "that the greatest thing that ever happened in this world was the making of the first airplane." That was a good answer, too. So were several other answers. The first steamboat, the first pen, the first eraser, the first fountain pen, the automobile, the washing machine, the electric icebox, radio, all these were mentioned. The bishop, however, knew that there was a better answer. Finally, a boy in the fifth pew raised his hand. He was little Eddie Kelly, one of the altar boys. The bishop knew Eddie because Eddie had often served the bishop's mass. "Well, Eddie," asked the bishop, "what do you think was the greatest thing that ever happened in this world?" Eddie answered in a clear voice, "The greatest thing that ever happened in this world was the birth of Jesus Christ. Jesus came to earth to make us better people, and the world would be very much better if all of us would do what Jesus taught." "Good for you, Eddie," smiled the bishop. "That's the right answer. The greatest thing that ever happened in this world was the birth of Jesus." Yes, Eddie Kelly won the bishop's prize. He won the bishop's rosary because Eddie gave the right answer to the bishop's question. Children, since this world began, some mighty important people have lived on this earth. There have been kings, queens, and emperors. There have been presidents, mighty soldiers, learned teachers, and great builders. There have been thousands of great men and women. But Jesus Christ was the greatest of them all. Jesus was greater than any man who has ever lived, because Jesus is God. Eddie Kelly said that Jesus came on earth to make all of us better people. Yes, Jesus came to show us the way to heaven. Jesus gave us 10 rules to follow, 10 laws, or as we call them, the 10 Commandments. If we keep these 10 rules, then, we will surely get to heaven. Then, too, Jesus made 7 sacraments to make it easy for us to get grace. Every time we receive one of these sacraments, we get grace in our souls, and that grace will buy our way into heaven. Oh, Jesus did so many good things for us. He showed us how to suffer. He even died for us. Just think how terrible it would be if Jesus had not come. The gates of heaven would still be closed, and it would be mighty hard for us to save our souls. If Jesus had not come, there would be no Catholic churches, no Catholic schools, no priests, no sisters. There would be no Mass. You wouldn't be able to go to confession. You couldn't receive Holy Communion. Why, you would be afraid to die. Yes, without Jesus, this would be a hard world, and you wouldn't be very happy. You can see that Jesus has been very good to us. It must have been very hard for him to leave heaven and come here and suffer. Jesus came to earth because he loves us. Jesus came to make us better people, to help us win heaven. Would you like to thank Jesus for being so good? Well, you can do that when you pray, when you assist at Mass, when you receive Holy Communion. You can thank Jesus for coming to earth by keeping his commandments and by receiving his sacraments often. You can thank Jesus by being a better boy or girl. As Eddie Kelly said so well, This world would be very much better if all of us would do what Jesus taught. End of chapter 9. Chapter 10 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 10. Blue Hats. The other day I read in the paper that a real princess went shopping. Now why was that news? That was news because it was the first time that this princess ever went shopping alone. Naturally, she was very excited. Early that morning, the young princess left the royal palace and rode in a beautiful carriage to a large department store. Of course, people were surprised to see the princess alone, and a few curious ones followed her. They all wondered what the princess was going to buy. I suppose you too are wondering what the princess bought on her first shopping trip. Did she buy a new dress? No. Did she buy new shoes? No, the princess didn't buy new shoes. Did she buy a fur coat? No, children, the princess bought none of these things. There was only one thing that the princess wanted, and that's why she went shopping. The princess wanted a new hat. Well, the princess looked at all kinds of hats. Gold hats and silver hats, black hats, brown hats, green hats, yellow hats, hats with feathers, hats with flowers, hats trimmed with ribbons and veils. But the princess didn't buy any of these hats. The princess wanted a certain kind of hat, and when she saw what she wanted, she bought it. What kind of a hat did the princess buy? The princess bought a blue hat. Now that isn't all. The princess liked her hat so well that she decided to shop in another store. In the second store, the princess looked at more hats, large hats, small hats, all kinds of hats. And in the second store, the princess bought another hat, a very lovely one. What kind of a hat did she buy in the second store? The princess bought another blue hat. The princess then went to 5 other stores, and in each store she bought a new hat, and each hat was a blue hat. 7 new hats. 7 blue hats. That's what the young princess bought the first time she went shopping. Of course, all the papers printed stories about the princess and her first shopping trip. Each story said that the princess bought 7 blue hats, and each story was read by thousands of women and girls. Then what do you think happened? Most of those women and girls went to stores, and they all bought blue hats. School teachers, nurses, clerks, storekeepers, factory workers, office girls, mothers, daughters, they all bought blue hats. The young princess certainly started something when she went shopping. When I read about the princess and her 7 blue hats, the thought came to me that we are very much like that princess. Yes, we are. Boys and girls, we too are shopping, and we're shopping for something to wear on our heads. Now, we're not shopping for blue hats. Oh, no. But we are shopping for a golden crown that, some day, we will wear in heaven. You know, God pays us for being good. Every time we do something good, God pays us by giving us grace. And that grace buys a crown for us in heaven. So, like the princess, we're shopping for a crown to wear in heaven. You want to save your soul. You are trying to save your soul. That's why you speak the truth. That's why you are honest. You obey. You say your prayers. You go to Mass. You go to confession. You receive Holy Communion. You do all these things because you know that by doing them you will earn grace. The more grace you earn, the more certain you will be of getting into heaven. The more grace you receive, the more beautiful will be your crown in heaven. I like to think of the Blessed Virgin Mary as our princess. When Mary was on earth, she spent all her time shopping for her crown in heaven. Mary never made a single sin, not even a venial sin. She never lied. She never disobeyed. She was never dishonest. Mary never lost her temper. She never became angry. Mary spent all her time doing good. And when Mary went to heaven, she found that she had earned the brightest crown in heaven. Her good deeds earned for her the best place in heaven, a place right next to Jesus. Many, many women and girls followed the example of the young princess, and they bought blue hats. Why don't you follow the example of our princess, Mary? Why don't you shop for grace in the same way that Mary did? Keep away from sin. Tell the truth. Be honest. Obey your parents and teachers. Say your prayers every day and go to Mass on Sunday. Receive Holy Communion often. If you do these things, children, you will keep away from sin, and you will earn lots of grace for your soul. The Blessed Virgin Mary wants you to earn a crown just like the one she wears. Remember, you have to work for that crown every day. Let others have their blue hats. You are working for something better. A gold crown. A crown like the one worn by our princess, the Blessed Virgin Mary. End of chapter 10. Chapter 11 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 11. The Great Umpire. How many like a good baseball game? Raise your hands. Well, it looks as though you all like baseball. That's fine, because baseball is a great game. It's the great American game. Boys, men, and even girls play baseball, and hundreds of men make their living playing the game. It's a grand sport, a grand game to play, and a great game to watch. Yes, every real boy and girl loves a good game of baseball. Now, I've seen a great many ball games. I've seen the Yankees play, and I've watched the Giants. I've seen the Dodgers, the Reds, the Cubs, and just about every big league team. I've seen Babe Ruth knock home runs, and I've seen the World Series. I've seen good games and bad games. But do you know the games that I liked best? The games that gave me the most fun were played by young boys. I have always liked to watch boys play ball. One of the best ball games I ever saw was between two teams of schoolboys, one called St. Mary's and the other called St. John's. The teams were playing for the championship of the city, and it was certainly a great game. I enjoyed every minute of it. When the game started, both teams were very nervous. They fought hard to win, and there was plenty of excitement. At the end of the fourth inning, neither team had made any hits, and neither side had scored any runs. So you can see that it was a good, tight game. Then in the fifth inning, something happened. The boys from St. Mary's were at bat, and there were 2 outs. The right fielder of St. Mary's picked up his bat and walked to the plate. The first ball pitched was a strike. Then came 2 balls and another strike. So there were 2 balls and 2 strikes. The pitcher threw the next ball. The batter swung, hit a grounder, and started for first base. The shortstop scooped up the ball and threw it to first base. Now, it looked to me as though the runner and the ball reached first base at the same time. Was the runner safe, or was he out? Well, we'll leave that to the umpire. The umpire raised his hand and yelled at the top of his voice, "The runner's out!" Of course, the boys from St. Mary's didn't like that, and every boy on the team ran toward first base. "Hey, ump!" they yelled. "He's safe! He's safe!" "The runner's out!" called the umpire again, but the boys insisted that the runner was safe. For several minutes the boys from St. Mary's argued with the umpire, while he just shook his head. Finally, the umpire turned from the boys and yelled again, "The runner's out!" "He's safe! He's safe!" insisted the boys, and then they began to plead. "Aw, ump, why don't you give us a break?" Suddenly the umpire turned and walked back toward the boys from St. Mary's. Raising both arms, he called for silence. "Now listen, boys," began the umpire. "I'm running this game, and I said that the runner is out. I can't help you fellows win. You've got to win yourselves. Talk won't win this game, but runs will. So go out and get yourself some runs." That was pretty good advice. It was good advice for the boys from St. Mary's, and it's good advice for you. Each one of you is trying to win a game. You are fighting hard to beat the devil. In other words, you are trying to save your soul. You must save your soul. You must win this game yourselves, the umpire told the ball players. And in the game of life, you, too, must save your own soul. If you lose your soul, you can't blame anybody. You can't blame God. Talk won't save your soul, and neither will good intentions. Good deeds are the things that count. Whenever you pray, visit a church, go to Mass, go to confession, receive Holy Communion, you do something good. When you obey your parents, when you tell the truth, when you are honest, when you hold back your temper, when you speak clean words and think clean thoughts, when you are kind and help the poor, you do something good for your soul. These are the things that earn grace for your soul, the things that help you save your soul. Every run counts in a ball game, and every run helps your side to win. Every good deed earns grace for your soul, and every good deed counts towards winning heaven. Too many boys and girls think that they are going to save their souls tomorrow or next year. They do a lot of talking, and they have good intentions, but they never get started. That's wrong, and those boys and girls are taking a terrible chance. If they wait too long, perhaps God will never give them the chance to get started. Don't you act that way. Remember, you have only one chance to save your soul, and you have that chance right now. So get started, begin today, and do some good deeds every day. That's the way to save your soul. Remember, in the game of life, God is the great umpire. He watches everything you do. He sees every play, and He decides which boys and girls have won the game. So, if you want to save your soul and win heaven, go out and earn your runs. With good deeds to your credit every day, you're bound to be a winner. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Rev. Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 12. The Flying Lady. A circus is always lots of fun. People like to watch the clowns, the dancing elephants, the bears on skates, the trained seals, the monkeys, the lions, and the tigers. Oh, there are so many interesting things to see at a circus. But do you know what part of the circus I like best? I like the acrobats, the men and women who do tricks high up in the air. For me, the acrobats are always the best part of the circus. Now, this morning I want to tell you a story about the circus. It's a true story, children, and a very, very sad one. Listen. A few summers ago, a great circus played in the city of Hartford. It was a fine, sunny afternoon. Men, women, and children crowded into the big tent to see the show. For more than an hour, thousands of people laughed at the funny clowns and clapped for the animals when they did their tricks. They listened to the band and ate popcorn and peanuts. Everyone was happy. Everyone was having a grand time. Then came the greatest act in the circus. A family of acrobats climbed long ladders and reached the very top of the tent. And what do you think the acrobats did? While the band played soft music, the acrobats rode bicycles forward and backward across a piece of wire stretched 40 feet above the crowd. Men, women, and children held their breath as they watched the daring performers, and they all felt better when the act was finished. Then one of the acrobats, a young girl looking very much like a pink butterfly, prepared to do a special act. Every eye was on the girl as she started to walk across the wire. But, suddenly, something terrible happened. The cry of "Fire! Fire!" ran through the tent. The circus tent was on fire. Of course, everybody left their places and rushed to the doors, but the circus lady, hoping to calm the people, went on with her act. When the flames began to spread, however, the circus lady hurried down the ladder and ran toward the door. In the excitement, she stumbled and fell to the ground, and men, women, and children walked right over her. She tried to get up, but she couldn't, and no one paid any attention to her. A little girl saw the circus lady on the ground. "Please, please," cried out the little girl. "Someone help the circus lady! Someone save her!" A man, hearing the cries of the little girl, lifted the lady to her feet and carried her to safety. Yes, the cries of a little girl saved the circus lady from the burning tent. Children, Do you know why I told that story? Well, I told that story because I think that the poor souls in purgatory are very much like the circus lady. The poor souls are surrounded by flames. Like the circus lady, the poor souls are helpless. They can't help themselves. Perhaps your cry, a prayer from you, will rescue the poor souls from their sufferings and carry them safely to God. When a person dies, children, his body is placed in the grave. Yes, the dead body is placed in the ground. But the soul of the dead person is not placed in the ground. Oh no! Before that soul can go to heaven, it must pay God back for every sin that soul made on earth. Perhaps, too, that soul may have some small sins on it, and those sins must come off before the soul can get into heaven. So that soul must spend some time in purgatory suffering for its sins. There are many poor souls in purgatory today, souls of people who, at one time, lived on this earth. When they lived on earth, those people could get as much grace as they wished, for they had the Mass and the sacraments. But now, they don't have these things, and they can't get grace for themselves. The poor souls can't pray, and they can't go to church. They can't go to confession or receive Holy Communion. The poor souls can't do anything to gain grace, and thus shorten their time in purgatory. But you, boys and girls, can help the poor souls. You can shorten their time in purgatory. Why, you can even get them out of purgatory and hurry their souls to God. How many of you would like to help the poor souls? Well, that's fine. Now here's what you can do. You can pray for the poor souls, and perhaps your one Hail Mary will get some poor soul out of purgatory. Here's something else you can do. When you come to church on Sunday, why don't you offer for the poor souls all the graces from the Mass? Once in a while, offer up your Holy Communion for them. These are ways by which you can help. Boys and girls, the poor souls are crying out to you for help. Don't let them down. Your prayers will save them from the fires of purgatory. Get busy and pray now. Pray every day for the poor souls. End of chapter 12. Chapter 13 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Rev. Gerald T. BRENNAN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 13. Amateur Night. Every boy and girl likes a contest. A contest is always lots of fun, especially when you work for a prize. Well, this morning I want to tell you about a contest that was held not so long ago. One Monday morning the children in the Caledonia school were told that they were going to have a contest, and there was great excitement. Any boy or girl who could sing, dance, play a musical instrument, or do any tricks could enter the contest, which was to be held in the school hall on Friday night. Yes, there was to be a prize, one prize of $5, and whichever boy or girl did best in the contest, that boy or girl was to receive the $5. Little 10-year-old David Connor listened to everything his teacher said about the contest. The more David thought about it, the more he wanted to win that prize. So David decided to enter the contest. That night at supper, David was certainly excited. He told his father and mother all about the contest, and then he surprised them. "I think," he said, "I'll go into the contest." "Why, David," asked the boy's father, "what will you do in the contest?" "Dad," he answered very seriously, "I'm going to sing. I'll sing 'Home on the Range.'" David's father was pleased. He liked the boy's spirit. So the father decided to help him. After supper, Mr. Connor sat at the piano and played while the boy sang. Over and over again they played and sang, "Home on the range, home on the range, home on the range." The next night David and his father practiced some more. They practiced Wednesday and again on Thursday. By that time David knew the words of the song by heart, and he sang the song very well. The next night was Friday, the night of the contest. Long before 8 o'clock, the school hall was crowded with parents and friends, and they all asked the same question: "Who is going to win the contest? Who will win the $5?" Promptly at 8 o'clock, the contest began. One little boy played the piano. and he played very well. Then a girl dressed like an angel danced. Another girl played the violin. After that a boy told some funny stories. There was more music, more dancing, and some singing. Finally a little boy came on the stage with his little dog. At the boy's orders, the dog walked on his hind legs. He danced and skipped rope. He even climbed a ladder and did all kinds of tricks. Oh, how the people clapped for the boy and his dog! It looked as though the boy would certainly win the $5. Now that wasn't the end of the contest. Oh no! There was one more act. The lady at the piano began to play Home on the Range, and David Connor walked across the stage. When the people saw David, oh, how they clapped! David was dressed in a cowboy suit with a yellow handkerchief around his neck. He wore a cowboy hat and carried a gun at his side. And this will surprise you. David wore a long gray beard that made him look like an old man. While he sang, the boy rolled his lasso just like a real cowboy. Well, the people liked David's outfit. They liked his singing too, and they liked especially the ending. When David finished his song, he made a low bow. And what do you think happened? David's beard fell off. The people laughed and clapped and cheered, while David, with his beard in his hand, walked off the stage. The contest was over. The winner would soon be announced. So, do you know what the judges did? They placed all the boys and girls who were in the contest in a straight line across the stage. Then one of the judges told the people to clap for their favorite. The boy or girl who would receive the most applause would win the contest. Then the judge held his hand over the head of each boy and girl, and the people clapped. I suppose you are wondering about that little boy and his dog. Well, the boy and his dog received lots of claps. So far, the boy with the dog was the winner. But there was still David Connor. Well, when the judge held his hand over David's head, you never heard so much noise. The people clapped and clapped for 2 minutes, while David's heart pounded within him. Yes, boys and girls, David Connor won the amateur contest. David Connor won the $5. Of course, the other boys and girls who were in the contest were disappointed. They were disappointed because they didn't win the prize. But that's the way it is in all amateur contests. Every boy and girl may do well, but there is only one prize. There is only one winner. Now let me tell you about another contest. You know, boys and girls, you are in a contest, and you are all trying to win heaven. In this contest, there isn't just one prize. You can all win because there's a prize for everyone. All that you have to do is love God and keep His laws. If you do these things, you'll be a winner. You'll win heaven, the greatest prize of all. Remember, every good thing you do helps you to win heaven, and you must do good every day. No one can help you because you must save your own soul. God's contest goes on every day, and you must work for your soul every day. You can't quit, and you mustn't lose. You must be a winner. David Connor worked hard to be a winner. That's why he won the contest. Remember, if you work hard in God's contest, you will win heaven. Keep your eye and your heart on God's prize, and work hard for that prize every day. God wants you to be a winner. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 14. The 10 o'clock Friend. This morning I want to tell you about 11-year-old Buddy Bennett, who lives on a farm, not very far from here. Like all boys and girls who live in the country, Buddy has a pet, a very unusual pet, a pet which he calls his 10 o'clock friend. One day last spring, Buddy left the house and went down to the pasture. And what do you think? Not only were the cows in the pasture, but a young deer was with them. Buddy Bennett could hardly believe his eyes. Yes, he saw a young deer, and the deer's leg was bleeding. Buddy didn't want to frighten the deer, so he walked very slowly. But the deer wasn't afraid of the little boy. At first, Buddy patted the deer with his hand, and the deer seemed to like it. Then the boy wrapped his handkerchief around the wounded leg. The deer knew that he had found a friend, because he remained with the cows for 10 days. Each morning Buddy took off the old cloth from the deer's leg and put on a clean one, and when the leg was healed, the deer went back to the woods. Now that's not the end of the story. Oh no! You know a deer likes salt. So every morning about 10 o'clock, the young deer came back to the Bennett farm, and every morning Buddy gave the deer a treat. He gave him some salt. You understand now how the boy and the deer became very good friends. Of course the deer had to have a name, so Buddy called the deer by the name of Judge. And Buddy used to say that Judge was his 10 o'clock friend. One morning when Judge came for his salt, Buddy tied a little bell around the deer's neck. I suppose you are wondering why the boy did that. Buddy tied the bell on the deer to warn hunters not to shoot a tame deer. After that, Buddy never had to worry about his 10 o'clock friend. He knew that, when hunters heard the sound of the bell, they would not shoot their guns. The other day Judge came at 10 o'clock for his salt. Then he hurried back to the woods. That afternoon Buddy decided that he would go to the woods, too. After reaching the woods, he walked only a short distance when something happened. The boy slipped and fell and twisted his leg under him. He tried to get up, but he couldn't move. Oh, how his leg hurt! Oh, how it pained! Buddy yelled and cried, but no one heard him, and he lay on the ground for a long time. He tried to pray, but he found it hard. He was cold, very cold, and the pain in his leg grew worse. He shouted and yelled some more, but no one came to help him. Buddy waited and waited, and I don't have to tell you that he was afraid. He was afraid that he might have to spend the night in the woods. Buddy Bennett spent some very unpleasant minutes in the woods, and every minute seemed like an hour. Buddy had just about given up hope when, all of a sudden, he heard the tinkle of a little bell. "It's Judge!" he yelled as his heart jumped. "Come, Judge! Come, Judge!" The young deer knew his friend's voice. He ran through the woods and was soon at the boy's side. Thinking that Buddy had some salt, the deer lowered his head and sniffed the boy's pocket. Buddy patted the deer, and then, putting his arm up over the deer's neck, he pulled himself up. With his arm thrown over the deer's neck, Buddy hobbled along on one foot. The boy and the deer walked slowly through the woods, then through the potato field and up the short hill until they reached home. Of course, the doctor cared for Buddy's leg, and in a few days he was well again. Boys and girls, that was a beautiful story and a true story. Buddy Bennett was kind to a young deer, and the young deer was kind to the little boy. You know, kindness always pays. Kindness at home, kindness in school, kindness when you play with your friends, and kindness to animals. Didn't Jesus say that every kind act will bring a reward? Yes, he did. After all, it doesn't cost very much to be kind. Why, it doesn't cost any money at all. Sometimes you only have to speak a kind word, and certainly that is very easy. You may only have to smile at some little boy or girl to show that you like them. Your smile will be an act of kindness. Sharing an apple or some candy with a playmate, helping someone with a heavy load, visiting a sick friend, helping someone who is poor. All these are acts of kindness. They are ways by which you show your neighbor that you love him. You have so many chances to be kind every day. Just look at the boys and girls who live on your street or in your neighborhood. Isn't it true that some of these children do not have as much as you do? Why, then, don't you share with them? Why not invite some of these children to play with you? Oh, there are so many ways by which you can love your neighbor, so many ways by which you can help him. Remember, children, God made every little boy and girl in this world, and He loves every one of them. God wants you to love them too. You can show your love for God's creatures by being kind to them. Don't you like people to be kind to you? Certainly you do. People expect you to be kind to them too. Perhaps no one will pay you for being kind, but just remember that God sees every kind act, and someday God will pay you well. After all, that's what really counts. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 15. That's My Boss. Most people like the sea. They like to travel on the ocean. They like to board a great ship and sail away to strange lands. I've done it several times, and I hope to do it again soon. I hope, too, that some day you will be able to take a trip on the ocean. I know that it will be something that you will never forget. Sailors, you know, live on the sea. They work on the sea. They are sailors because they like to travel. Now, do you know that some priests live on the sea, too? Yes, that's true. Why, there are any number of priests who have spent years on the sea. Of course, these priests don't live on the sea just because it's fun. Oh, no. These priests work on the sea. The sea is their parish. And these priests bring Christ to the sailors who ride the ships. These priests are known as chaplains, and they teach the sailors about God. They say Mass for the sailors, hear the confessions, and give them Holy Communion. Yes, the chaplains do the very same things for the sailors that we priests do for the people in the parish. Well, Father McCarthy was a sea chaplain for 13 years. That's a long time to spend on the ocean. But Father McCarthy loved his work. He loved his sailors. Every morning the priest said Mass for his sailors, and every Saturday he heard their confessions. He was a kind priest, a helpful priest, a priest who wanted his sailors to be the best sailors on the sea. He wanted his boys to work hard and have fun. Above all, he wanted his boys to be good. He wanted his boys to love God. One night after supper, Father McCarthy made his usual visits to the different parts of the ship. First, he went down to the ship's hospital and visited the sailors who were sick. Then he stopped at the game room and watched some of the sailors wrestle and box. He talked with boys who were lonesome and tried to cheer them. And for a short time, he visited with some of the officers. Finally, Father McCarthy decided to go up on the top deck of the ship, where he thought it would be quiet. When the priest reached the top of the stairs, he heard some loud talking. Some of the boys were arguing. Father McCarthy heard one of the sailors swear, and he heard another boy take the name of Jesus in vain. Then he heard all the boys talk and argue at the same time. They cursed, they swore, they abused God's name. That was too much for Father McCarthy. The priest hurried toward the sailors and raised his hand. "Stop!" he called out in a loud voice. "Don't talk like that. Don't you know that you are abusing God's name? That's my boss, and you can't talk like that about him." Well, the sailors stopped their cursing and swearing immediately. Not a boy dared to answer the priest. Instead, they walked away in silence and shame. Each boy knew that he had hurt God. Each boy knew that he had hurt the priest. Children, God is everyone's boss. He is your boss, and He is my boss. We belong to God because He made us. God is our Father, and we are His children. Don't forget all the fine things God has done for us. Why, He came down to earth so that He could be near us. He lived for us, suffered for us, died for us. He gave us Himself in the Holy Eucharist. He made it easy for us to get to heaven. Yes, God did many wonderful things for you and me. He did all these things because He loves us. Never once did God do anything to hurt us. Why, then, should we hurt God by our bad language? Shouldn't we love God as much as He loves us? Certainly we should, and we should speak His name with love. When we curse or swear, we are talking about our best friend. Is that the way to speak about our best friend? No! Remember, the name of Jesus came from heaven. Mary or Joseph didn't choose that name. It was chosen by God. So that name is very sacred. It is something very holy. When you speak that name, you should speak it with love. You should speak it as though you were saying a prayer, because the name of Jesus is really a prayer. Some children are just like the sailors in my story. When they argue or become angry, immediately they start to abuse God. They swear and curse and use the name of Jesus in vain. That's wrong, and that's a sin against the second commandment. It's a bad habit, children, a sinful habit, a habit that should be corrected. You wouldn't abuse the name of your father or mother. Oh, no! You love your father and mother too much to take their name in vain. Why, then, should you take the name of Jesus in vain? Remember, Jesus is your boss. Jesus is your master. Jesus is your God. Speak His name only as a prayer. Speak the name of Jesus with love. Remember, too, that God hears every word you speak. Don't let God hear you talking about Him. Don't hurt God by swearing or cursing. Be careful when you are playing with your friends. Even though you can't see God, He is with you, and God is always listening. Keep your speech clean. End of chapter 15. Chapter 16 of Just for Juniors. Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. BRENNAN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Therese. Chapter 16. Green Apples. Ginger and Boots were two little puppies who lived in the country. They lived on a farm with their mother, and they were very happy. The mother taught the little dogs how to play and chase each other the way all little dogs do. When it rained, she showed them how to hide inside their little white house. Yes, the mother dog took very good care of Ginger and Boots. One day the mother sent the two little dogs on an errand. She sent them down the road to borrow some bones from Big Dog Pete. Well, I don't have to tell you that Ginger and Boots were excited. They had never been away from their own farm except with their mother. Now they were going to visit Big Dog Pete, and they were going alone. Before the dogs left, the mother warned them to be careful. She told them to go to Big Dog Pete's house and no place else. They were not to speak to any strange dogs, and they were not to chase any cats. Finally, the mother warned them not to pick up any strange bones or eat anything along the way. Ginger and Boots nodded their heads. They told their mother not to worry, and they promised to obey every one of her orders. Well, Ginger and Boots started off on their errand. It was a beautiful day, and the sun was warm and bright. The two puppies enjoyed their walk along the lovely country road. Now and then they stopped to sniff a pretty flower or roll in the tall green grass. Once they tried to be friendly with a big brown cow. But the big brown cow, giving them an angry look, swished her tail and mooed so loud that she frightened the puppies, and they ran down the road as fast as they could. Finally, the two dogs reached the house of Big Dog Pete. And were they disappointed? Big Dog Pete wasn't there. The door of his house was open, but Pete was not at home. "Shall we go inside and wait?" Boots asked his brother. "No, no," answered Ginger. "Let's walk some more. We'll stop here on the way back, and maybe Pete will be home then." The two dogs forgot about their promise to their mother. They walked and they ran, and they walked some more. Oh, it was lots of fun, and Ginger and Boots enjoyed every minute of it. Never once did they think about their mother or home. Never once did they think that they were disobeying their mother's command. The puppies were having fun, and they liked it. After some time, the two dogs came to the end of the road. And what do you think they found at the end of the road? A large body of water. Boots thought it was a lake, but Ginger said it was an ocean. So, for several minutes, the two dogs stood on the shore watching the water. Then Ginger had an idea. "Let's go for a swim," he urged as he started for the water. Boots thought that was a good idea too, and he followed his brother. Well, the two dogs swam in the water for some time. Of course, they had lots of fun, swimming, splashing, and ducking in the cool water. When they left the water, they were both hungry. They went into a woods, and after leaving the woods, they found a large orchard. Yes, they went into the orchard, and there on the ground they found some green apples. I said that the dogs were hungry. Yes, they were very hungry. So they ate the green apples. They ate several green apples. And finally, they couldn't eat any more. Little dogs, you know, get tired, and by this time Ginger and Boots were very tired. So the two puppies lay under a tree, and very soon they were sound asleep. Now, Ginger and Boots didn't sleep very long. Why? Well, I think you know the reason. Both dogs awoke with terrible pains in their stomachs. And oh, how they cried! Oh, how they suffered! Too many green apples! Too many green apples! The two little dogs were a sad sight. They were far from home, with no one to help them. They cried and they barked and they tried to be brave, but it was hard to be brave. How could two puppies be brave when they had green apple peens? Then, too, it was getting dark. For the first time, Ginger and Boots thought about home. They thought about their mother. They knew that they had made a terrible mistake. They had disobeyed their mother, and they had eaten green apples. For 2 hours Ginger and Boots moaned and cried in the darkness. But suddenly they heard a voice. They heard a dog bark. Yes, yes, it was their mother's voice. "Help, help!" cried the two little puppies through the darkness. "We're over here, Mother. Come and get us." Well, it didn't take very long for the mother to find the two little dogs. And what do you think? The mother, with tears in her eyes, listened to their story, and she didn't scold. The good mother knew that her dogs had learned a lesson. The 3 dogs cuddled closely together and spent the night in the strange orchard. But they didn't sleep. The mother spent the night watching over her family, and the 2 puppies spent the night in terrible pain. The next morning the mother led her puppies home, and from that day to this, Ginger and Boots haven't eaten any more green apples. Children, Ginger and Boots made one big mistake. They disobeyed. They disobeyed their mother. And what happened? They got into trouble. And little boys and girls who disobey always get into trouble. Remember, God has given you a father and mother, and your father and mother watch over you and keep you out of trouble. Your mother and father know what is good for you, and they know what is bad too. Obey them, and you won't get into trouble. Obey them, and you will be safe and happy. Don't be like Ginger and Boots. Don't eat any green apples. Obey. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 17. The Horse That Liked Sandwiches. Strange things happen every day. The other day I read about a horse that liked sandwiches. I read about him in the paper, so the story must be true. Percy, the horse, lived in England, and when he worked, he pulled an ash wagon. Now, Percy was a very good worker, but he liked to play, too. When Percy was free to play, he spent his time roaming along the banks of the Avon River. Like all horses, Percy liked to eat, and most of the time he was hungry. The horse liked all kinds of food, but best of all, he liked sandwiches. When Percy was very hungry, he stole food. Can you imagine a horse stealing sandwiches? Well, that's just what Percy did. One Sunday last summer, Percy walked along the bank of the river looking for sandwiches. He went only a short distance when he saw a man and a woman getting ready to eat their lunch. The man and woman were hungry, and the horse was hungry too. So what did Percy do? First of all, he chased the man and woman. Then he ate their lunch. Percy did the same thing on several occasions. He scared people and stole their lunches. Once a woman threw her coat over her lunch, but that didn't stop the horse. Oh no! Percy ate the coat and the lunch too. Well, the other day Percy got into some real trouble. As usual, he galloped along the river bank looking for sandwiches. He didn't see many people that day, but he did see a man standing on the bank of the stream, fishing. Now what do you think Percy did? He pushed the man into the river, stole the man's sandwiches from his basket, and ate them. I suppose you are wondering whether the fisherman was angry. He certainly was angry, very angry. The man felt that Percy went a little bit too far. Then and there he decided that Percy should be punished. The man had Percy arrested. Of course, the horse didn't have to go to jail, but Percy's owner had to go to court. Percy's owner told the judge that the horse was harmless, but the fisherman told a different story. He told the judge that the horse pushed him into the water and stole his sandwiches, and other people told the judge that the horse had stolen their sandwiches too. The judge listened to all the stories and thought for a long time. The judge knew that stealing is a crime. He knew that Percy had stolen many times. The horse had done wrong and deserved to be punished. So the judge made Percy's master pay a fine of $100. $100 is a lot of money. Do you know why the judge made Percy's master pay so much? The judge wanted to teach the man a lesson. He wanted the man to stop the horse from stealing. Yes, that's just what the horse did. He stole. Percy took sandwiches that didn't belong to him. When you steal, boys and girls, you take something that belongs to someone else. You take something that you do not own, something that does not belong to you. Stealing is a sin against one of God's laws. It's a sin against the seventh commandment. You have things that belong to you. They don't belong to your brother or sister or to the boy or girl who lives next door. Your brother or sister or the boy or girl who lives next door has no right to take your things. No one has a right to steal your things, and you know how bad you feel when someone takes something from you. If someone steals from you, he must return the stolen things before God will forgive him. You, too, must return anything you steal, or God will not forgive you. Children, be honest. Never touch anything that does not belong to you. God sees you when you steal. God catches you every time. Remember, stealing little things is a sin, too. You have no right to take pencils, erasers, candy, fruit, marbles, or pennies that belong to someone else. You may think that these little things are not worth very much, but that doesn't make any difference. If you take little things, you steal them, and stealing is always a sin. Children, let me give you a little advice. You have heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again. When the devil tempts you to steal, put your hands in your pockets and keep them there. With your hands in your pockets, you just can't steal. End of chapter 17. Chapter 18 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 18. Cracker Crumbs. What part of the newspaper do you always read first? I suppose you read the funnies. Most men, however, turn first to the sport page because they like sports. Well, Sam Powers, the man in our story this morning, likes sports, and every night after supper Sam read the sport page. The other night Sam sat in his favorite chair in the kitchen reading about sports. He was happy and contented, but he didn't stay that way very long. Wait until I tell you what happened. A fly was roaming around the kitchen and decided to rest right on top of Sam's bald head. Now, Sam didn't like that, so when he felt the fly on his head, he slapped the top of his head with his hand. Of course, the fly was wide awake and flew away before it was too late. Now, this fly was very hungry, so he decided to get something to eat. He flew into the pantry, and there, on a table, he found several dishes of food: sweet potatoes, cabbage salad, chicken, bread, cookies, chocolate cake. No, the fly didn't touch any of these things, because he saw something that he liked better. He saw a dish of crackers. And did that fly like crackers? Why, he liked crackers just as much as you like ice cream. "Here's where I have a party," said the fly to himself as he stood on the edge of the cracker dish. Yes, the fly did have a party, He had a grand party of cracker crumbs, and they were good cracker crumbs too. No one bothered the fly. No one tried to chase him away. It was the best party that Mr. Fly had had in a long time. When he finished his meal, the fly brushed off his clothes with his tiny wings. Then he decided to have some fun. "Guess I'll bother Mr. Powers again," he laughed to himself and flew through the air. Sure enough, the fly sat down on Sam's head, and, at first, the man didn't know that the fly was there. All of a sudden, however, the fly tickled the man's head. Sam jumped, and so did the fly. What did the fly do then? Well, he flew around and buzzed for a long time, and, finally, he went back to the crackers. I always thought that flies liked chocolate cake, but not this fly. No, sir! This fly liked crackers, and, for the second time, he had a party all by himself. Again, no one bothered the fly. No one tried to chase him away. After eating, the fly again brushed the crumbs from his clothes with his tiny wings. Lifting his wings, he flew around the pantry several times and then peeked into the kitchen. Yes, Sam Powers was still there, and he was still reading the evening paper. What do you think? The fly decided to tease Mr. Powers again. The fly was smart. He made very little noise as he flew around and waited for the right moment. When he sat down very gently on Sam Powers' head, nothing happened. He tiptoed around the bald spot, and nothing happened. But when Mr. Fly tried to bite Sam, something did happen. Sam jumped to his feet, and the fly jumped too. Yes, the fly was safe, and he laughed to himself as he buzzed around the kitchen. Now, the fly didn't buzz very long. No, sir! What do you think he did? He went back to the crackers. They were certainly good cracker crumbs, and the fly enjoyed his feast. Once he thought he would try the chocolate cake, but he changed his mind. This was his night for cracker crumbs. He wanted cracker crumbs and nothing else. Finally, the fly could eat no more. Again he brushed the crumbs from his clothes, and once again he decided to visit the kitchen. When the fly entered the kitchen this time, he noticed something that was different. Sam Powers was not reading the evening paper. Sam sat in his chair holding the paper which he had folded neatly. Had Sam finished his reading, or was he tired? The fly wondered. Well, the fly buzzed around the kitchen several times, and Sam never moved. Then the fly buzzed some more, and Sam never moved. "He must be asleep," said the fly to himself, "but I can't take any chances." So the fly buzzed some more, and Sam never moved. Then the fly became very bold. He decided to take a chance, and, once again, he landed safely right on top of the man's head. The fly waited for a moment, and then began to crawl slowly. But just then, something terrible happened. Sam Powers slapped the fly with his paper. It was a hard slap, and the fly fell to the floor, dead. Of course, that's the end of the story. And that story has a very good lesson. The lesson is this: when you're full of crumbs, don't go buzzing around. I suppose you are wondering just what I mean. Well, there are some little boys and girls who make a habit of picking up crumbs. They pick up little stories about their neighbors. And then what do? They go buzzing around and bother other boys and girls by telling these stories. In other words, they carry tales. Yes, some children are always picking up gossip, and they spend their time buzzing around and telling that gossip to others. Very often, too, these children cause lots of trouble. Now, that's wrong. That's a sin. No one likes a person who carries stories. No one likes a person who talks behind another person's back. It's a mean trick. It's cowardly. So don't be a coward, and don't spend your time buzzing around with stories about your friends. If you hear something about one of your friends, keep it to yourself. Even though that thing is true, don't tell it. Remember, we all have our faults. You have faults as well as your neighbor. You don't like to have people going around telling your faults. Well, you shouldn't tell the faults of your neighbor. Certain things that you hear or know should be held as close secrets. Don't be telling secrets. Children, watch that tongue of yours. That tongue can cause lots of trouble. Your tongue can do lots of damage. When you are tempted to tell something about your neighbor, just think about the fly in my little story. When you are full of crumbs, don't go buzzing around. End of chapter 18. Chapter 19 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 19. No Bread. All boys and girls like bread. Bread and butter, bread and jam, bread after school, bread for sandwiches, bread for picnics. Oh, we all like bread, and we eat a great deal of it. Do you know why we all eat so much bread? Because doctors tell us that it is good for us. We need bread because it builds strong bodies. Wouldn't it be terrible if we didn't have bread? There would be no toast for breakfast, no sandwiches for lunch, no bread pudding for dessert. Of course, we could eat lots of vegetables and fruit, but we would certainly miss our bread. Yes, bread is a very important food, and it would be hard to live without it. Now that I'm talking about bread, I suppose you think that you are not going to have a story this morning. Well, you are going to have a story. I'm going to tell you about a small town in the northern part of Michigan. Yes, it's a very small town, and about 100 people live there. Shortly after Christmas, it began to snow in this town, and it snowed for 3 days and 3 nights. Why, it snowed so hard that the town was almost buried in snow. Roads were blocked, the school was closed, the trains couldn't run. For several days, no one could leave or enter the town. At first, everyone thought that the snow was lots of fun. But after a few days, men and women began to worry. No food could be shipped into the town, and there was hardly any food left in the one store in town. What the people wanted most was flour. They had no flour. Without flour, they had no bread. Mothers and fathers needed bread. Little children cried for bread. But there was no bread. No bread in the little town buried in the snow. After days of worrying and waiting, one man in the town decided to do something. So he phoned to the chief of police in the nearest city. The man begged the chief to send help, and the chief promised to do something the next day. The next morning, people were surprised to see a plane flying over the small town. The pilots circled the town several times, and suddenly they flew very low. One of the pilots dropped several packages, and they fell through the air and landed in the soft snow. The men of the town opened the packages, and what do you think they found? They found bread. 400 loaves of bread. Why, there was enough bread for everyone. 4 loaves of bread for each person in the town. That day many prayers were said by the people in that little town in Michigan. They were prayers of thanks for the bread that came down from heaven. Do you know that that story about the people buried in the snow is our story too? Yes, it is. You know, many hundreds of years ago, the people on this earth were buried in sin. When God saw the people buried in sin, He wanted to help them. So what did God do? He came down from heaven and gave people the Holy Eucharist. The Holy Eucharist, you know, is bread for the soul. The Holy Eucharist is food for the soul. The Holy Eucharist makes the soul strong. Now, God didn't give the Holy Eucharist only to the people who lived 1900 years ago. Oh, no! The Holy Eucharist is still here on earth. It is in every Catholic church. It is on our altars. The Holy Eucharist is for us. It is for you and me. When we go to Holy Communion, we receive the Holy Eucharist. We receive the body and blood of Christ. Jesus comes to us, and His body and blood become food for our souls. God is certainly very good to us. He gives us Himself in Holy Communion. Boys and girls, you know that your body needs food. If you don't eat, your body will die. Well, your soul needs food too, and the Holy Eucharist is the only food you can receive for your soul. Perhaps some of your souls are starving right now. They are starving because you haven't gone to Holy Communion in some time. If that's the case, you had better get busy. Go to Holy Communion soon. Your soul needs food, and that food is Christ. You can't go to Holy Communion too often. You need Jesus so much. You need His help in everything you do. Jesus wants to come to you. Why, then, don't you receive Him more often? Jesus wants to help you with His grace. Children, the Holy Eucharist is your food from heaven, food for your soul. Don't neglect that food because your soul needs it. Receive Holy Communion often. End of chapter 19. Chapter 20 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 20. The Silver Cobwebs. It was the Sunday before Christmas. Mr. and Mrs. Cleary knew that Santa Claus would be very busy on Christmas Eve, and they decided to help him. They decided to trim their Christmas tree so that Santa would have nothing to do except to leave the presents. They trimmed the tree with popcorn, candy canes, animal crackers, little bells, stars, and angels. Then they placed the tree in a corner of the library and locked the door so that the children could not see it before it was time. Mr. and Mrs. Cleary thought that they were the only ones who had seen the tree. But they were wrong. Patches, the dog, saw the tree with her great black eyes. The little gray kitty saw the tree with her little blue eyes. The yellow canary saw it too with his wise, bright eyes. Even a little mouse peeked at the tree when the kitty was not around. But there were some others in the house who hadn't seen the beautiful Christmas tree. They were the little gray spiders. You see, spiders live in corners, the warm corners of sunny attics and the dark corners of cellars. Of course, the spiders expected to see the Christmas tree too. But just before Christmas, Mrs. Cleary began to clean the house. She swept, dusted, and scrubbed because she wanted everything to be grand and clean for the Christ child's birthday. Her broom went into all the corners, and, of course, the spiders had to run and hide. So the spiders couldn't see the Christmas tree. Spiders like to know all about everything, and spiders like to see everything. So they were very sad. They wanted to see that Christmas tree. They waited in the attic and waited in the cellar, waited for the time when they could leave their hiding places and see the tree. Well, the day before Christmas, Mrs. Cleary was busy in the kitchen baking mince pies and Christmas cookies. So what do you think the spiders did? They crept down the attic stairs and up the cellar stairs. They crept along the halls, then under the library door and into the beautiful room. There were fat mother spiders and old papa spiders and little curly spiders, the baby ones. And they all looked at the Christmas tree. Around and around the tree they crawled, and they looked and looked and looked. Why, the spiders ran all over the tree and looked at every single thing. Up and down, in and out, the spiders ran over every branch, and they saw everything right up close. You may be sure that the spiders stayed until they had seen all there was to be seen. Then they went away, quite happy. The spiders had seen the Christmas tree. Now, some people say that in the still, dark night before Christmas, the Christ child visits every home. But when the Christ child looked at the Cleary tree, what do you suppose? The tree was covered with webs. Everywhere the spiders had been, they had left a spider web. And you know they had been just everywhere. So the tree was covered from bottom to top with spider webs, all hanging from the branches. Of course, the Christ child knew that mothers don't like spider webs. It would never, never do to have a Christmas tree covered with webs. So the Christ child touched the spiders' webs and turned them all to silver. And the silver spider webs shone and shone all over the beautiful Christmas tree. Now you know why Christmas trees have silver webs. Now, I don't know whether this story is true or not, but it could be true. The Christ child is God and can do anything. He does even greater things than change cobwebs into silver. Why, every day he goes around looking, not at Christmas trees, but at souls dark and black with the cobwebs of sin. And Christ changes those souls and makes them beautiful with His grace. Yes, children, Christ does all this when you go to confession. Before confession, your soul is covered with the cobwebs of sin. When there are sins on your soul is not beautiful. It is ugly. But confession changes all that. When you go to confession, you tell God that you are sorry for your sins, and you promise God that you will not sin again. Then what happens? God touches your soul and cleans the sins from it and fills your soul with grace. After confession, the sins are gone. Your soul is beautiful and it shines with God's grace. No one likes cobwebs. No boy or girl can be happy with a soul covered with the cobwebs of sin. That's why you should go to confession often. It is the only way by which you can get back into God's grace. So if you ever fall into sin, hurry to confession. Saturday in most homes is the day when Mother cleans house. It's the day when Mother cleans away the cobwebs. Well, Saturday is confession day too, the day when you should have your soul cleaned by God. You know, I think that Jesus likes Saturday. Why? Because every Saturday Jesus sees so many boys and girls going to confession. Jesus likes to see children with clean souls. So when your soul gets dirty, clean away the cobwebs of sin by going to confession. End of chapter 20. Chapter 21 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 21. The Man Who Hated God. Would you like to hear a true story this morning? Every word of the story is true. Of course, I can't tell you the real name of the man in the story, so we're going to call him Eddie White. When Eddie White was a boy, he went to a Catholic school and served as an altar boy. He was a fine worker, and all the sisters and priests liked Eddie. He said his prayers, went to Mass every Sunday, and received Holy Communion often. God and Eddie were very good friends. After Eddie left school, however, he began to change. He became careless. He seldom said his prayers, missed Mass often, and hardly ever received Holy Communion. Time and time again his parents talked to Eddie. His parents talked to him and warned him that he was doing wrong. But Eddie wouldn't listen. He was too busy, he told his parents, having a good time. He didn't have any time for God. Now, God was very patient with Eddie. Even though Eddie had changed, God did not change. God still loved him. When Eddie was 21, he left home. He traveled far and wide and even crossed the ocean. No matter where he went, Eddie never said any prayers. He never went to Mass. He forgot all about God. No wonder he had bad luck. He had job after job, but somehow he was never successful. He never seemed to get ahead. Then Eddie began to grumble. He began to complain. He blamed God because he was not successful. He blamed God for his failures. He blamed God for everything. "Oh, I hate God! I hate Him!" he cried out one day in a fit of anger. Eddie White hated God. That was a terrible thing for him to say. But God did not hate Eddie, because God never hates anyone. God still loved Eddie even though he had made a terrible mistake. After months of traveling, Eddie returned home. It was the same story. No prayers, no Mass, no Holy Communion. His parents begged him to return to God, but Eddie refused to listen. Then one day, Eddie became very sick. For weeks he suffered terrible pain. He became weaker and weaker, and through all his sufferings he refused to pray. When the priest came to visit, Eddie refused to see him. Eddie's parents, however, did not lose hope. They prayed every day and begged God to hear their prayers. God did hear their prayers and answered them. "Mother," said Eddie one morning, I'm very sick, and I did a lot of thinking last night. Please send for the priest." Within half an hour the priest was at Eddie's bedside. The two men talked for a long time, and when they finished, Eddie felt better. Yes, Eddie went to confession, received Holy Communion and extreme unction, and the last blessing. Eddie was very happy. Once again, God and Eddie were friends. After the priest left, Eddie was alone for some minutes. He prayed as he had never prayed before, prayers of thanks to God who had been so good to him. As he was praying, his father and mother entered the room. The parents did not speak, but after some moments Eddie broke the silence. "I'm at peace with God," he said. "I have received the sacraments, but I haven't yet saved my soul. Get busy with the rosary and help me." Both parents, kneeling at the side of the bed, took turns saying the rosary, and Eddie joined them. All through that day hundreds of Hail Marys went up to heaven. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death." Those were the last words Eddie spoke. He died at 5 o'clock. Children, I feel very sure that God and His Blessed Mother heard those prayers. Eddie White had a happy death, and I know that he is in heaven this morning. Someday you may have a chance to help someone get to heaven. You may be in a home where someone is dying. Don't think that just because the dying person has received the last sacraments, he has saved his soul. That's the time when the devil is very busy trying to tempt the dying person. You should help the dying person to save his soul by doing just what Eddie's parents did. When a person is dying, get down on your knees and pray. Help the dying person to pray, and pray that he may have a happy death. When a person is dying, children, very often he is so weak and tired that he cannot pray himself. But you can help him. The dying person may not be able to say the words, but he will hear you say the words, and your prayers will help him to think about God. Then, too, your prayers for the dying person will shorten his time in purgatory. So don't stand around and watch a person die. Help the person to die well. Say the rosary. Say any prayers. But above all, pray. End of chapter 21. Chapter 22 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 22. A Piece of String. Every boy and girl has a close friend. Sam Papa's friend was Jack Dale. Both boys were the same age. They were 11. They lived on the same street and were in the same grade in school. Sam and Jack played ball together. They skated, went to scout meetings and the movies together. People used to say that if you wanted to find Sam, all that you had to do was look for Jack. The two boys were always together. While Sam and Jack were very good friends, they were also very close rivals. In school, each boy tried to get higher marks than the other. In their games, one boy always tried to be better than the other. Sam and Jack had lots of fun trying to beat each other. They were regular fellows. When most of the boys in the neighborhood had kites, Sam and Jack decided to make kites too. Of course, Sam tried to make his kite better than Jack's, and Jack tried to make his better than Sam's. Well, the boys worked several hours making their kites. Finally, the kites were finished. They had 2 dandy kites, and both the boys were very proud. While the boys were admiring their kites, Sam had an idea. "Let's have a race," he said, "and see who has the better kite." Jack liked the idea. "All right," he answered. "How about Saturday?" Then and there the boys decided to have a kite race on Saturday afternoon. For the next 2 days the kite race was the talk of the neighborhood, and there was great excitement among the boys' friends. Some wanted Sam to win, others wanted Jack to win. Why, it seemed as though everybody was talking about the great race. Saturday was a grand day, and at 1 o'clock the boys, followed by their friends, started for the park. When they reached the park, Sam's friends lined up on the right side, and Jack's friends stood on the left. Before the race began, both sides yelled and cheered. Both sides wanted their favorite to win. Sam had a ball of string, and Jack had a ball of string too. In each ball there were 900 feet of string. Now that's a lot of string! As each boy fastened his string to his kite, he hoped to use every inch of it. At last the boys were ready. Sam and Jack shook hands while the crowd clapped and cheered. Then the boys held their kites in their right hands. They waited for the signal. "Ready, set, go!" yelled the crowd. At the word "go," a slight breeze lifted the kites from the boys' hands. The race was on, and the kites began to climb. Up, up, up! Higher and higher went the two kites as the boys let out more string. For a while the race was very close. Then Sam's kite took the lead. But Sam had the lead only a short time. Jack let out more string, and his kite began to climb. In a short time the two kites were together again. Up, up, up! Both kites climbed higher and higher as both boys let out more string. After some time Sam and Jack reached the end of their string. The two kites could fly no higher, and both kites were the same distance from the ground. "It's a tie! It's a tie!" yelled the crowd. Sam smiled and seemed to be satisfied. But Jack was not happy. Jack didn't want the race to end in a tie. Jack wanted to win. He wanted to beat Sam. So what do you think Jack did? Thinking that his kite would go still higher, Jack let go of his string. Did Jack's kite go higher? No, it didn't. Just as soon as Jack let go, his kite came down and crashed to the ground. Yes, children, Sam Papa won the kite race. He won because he held on to his piece of string. I suppose you boys and girls think that the wind makes a kite stay up in the air. Well, that's not true. Of course, the wind helps, but a kite stays up in the air only when it is fastened to something. The kite is fastened to a string, and you must hold the string. Just as soon as you let go of your string, your kite will not stay up. It will come down with a bang. You know, I like to think that life is a contest in which we are all trying to win heaven. As you go through life, you'll find that you are very much like a kite. You do your best when you're fastened tightly to someone, and that someone is Christ. Prayer is the piece of string that fastens you to Christ. Just as long as you are tied to Christ by prayer, things will go well with you. Stop praying, and what happens? When you stop praying, you begin to crash, and your soul is in danger of falling into sin. Children, you must pray, and you must pray every day. You must keep yourselves tied to Christ at all times. When the wind blows and you are tempted to sin, you need Christ to steady you, and Christ will steady you if you pray. Prayer is very important for you. If you want to save your soul, and you do want to save your soul, don't ever break that string that ties you to Christ. Pray, pray. End of chapter 22. Chapter 23 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 23. God and the Little Blind Girl. Girls like to run and play. They like movies, picnics, pretty dresses, fancy shoes, and stylish hats. And little girls like to dream. Yes, they spend a great deal of time dreaming. About what do they dream? Well, that's a secret, and I'm not going to give away any secrets this morning. But I am going to tell you a story about Mildred Walker. It's a sad story, and a true story. Mildred lived in Detroit and was in the 5th grade. She was a good pupil and worked hard in school. But after school, she had plenty of fun. She played hard, laughed easily, and had lots of friends. Mildred certainly enjoyed life. Always smiling, always happy, the little girl never found fault, never quarreled, never complained. No wonder that her friends loved her. Of course, Mildred loved her friends too. She loved life. She loved God. I think that God loved Mildred because, one day, He asked her to carry a very heavy cross. Mildred was taken sick, very sick. For a few days she remained at home, and then the doctor ordered the girl to be moved to a hospital. Did that scare little Mildred Walker? Not at all. The little girl was a real soldier. She wasn't afraid to go to the hospital because she knew that the doctors would help her. She knew, too, that God would hear her prayers and make her well again. Mildred spent 8 months in the hospital, 8 long months of suffering and pain. But the little girl never found fault. She never complained. Even in her sickness, she smiled easily and was very patient. Of course, many times Mildred longed to be back at school. If she could only get out and play! She longed for the day when she would be well again. She was certain that God would take care of her, that He would make her well, that He would answer her prayers. Mildred prayed and prayed for one thing, that God would make her well. Every morning she received Holy Communion, and every morning she begged God to make her well. Now, don't get the idea that Mildred was trying to hurry God. She wasn't trying to hurry God, but she wanted God to know that she needed Him. She knew that God was taking His time, but she felt that God had to take care of many other people first. Some day God would get around to her. Then God would answer her prayers and she would be well again. Little Mildred became weaker and weaker, and one morning she tried to open her eyes, but her eyes wouldn't open. Mildred was blind. The girl couldn't see. Even then she didn't complain. Mildred Walker was certainly a brave girl, and she never gave up hope. She would get well. She would. She would. God would make her well. That's what she believed. That's what she hoped. That was her prayer. Then came Mildred's birthday. The little girl had been awake most of the night, and in the morning she was tired and weak and burning with fever. At 8 o'clock the priest came to give her Holy Communion. As the priest knelt at the side of the bed, Mildred prayed for a long time, prayed that God would make her well. Finally, the little girl asked a question. "Father," she asked, "am I going to die?" The priest did not speak. Then the little girl asked again, "Father, am I going to die?" The priest touched the child's hand and did not answer. The little girl understood. Tears ran down her cheeks, and after some moments she cried out in anger, "God, I prayed to get well, and you're not even listening to me." Mildred was wrong. God was listening, and He heard every one of the girl's prayers. All the time she was in the hospital, God was listening. And what do you think God did? That same afternoon, God took Mildred to heaven. Now the little girl sees again, plays again, laughs again, in heaven. Yes, God answered the girl's prayers. God gave Mildred something better than she wanted. There are too many boys and girls who act like Mildred. These boys and girls pray for so many things, and when they don't get them, they become angry with God. Yes, when some children don't get answers to their prayers quickly, they cry out, "God, you're not even listening to me." Now that's wrong. God is always listening. God hears every single prayer. Sometimes God makes you wait. He wants to see whether you really want the thing for which you are praying, and He makes you ask and ask. If you want something from your mother, very often you don't get it the first time you ask. So what do? You tease and beg until your mother gives it to you. Well, God likes to be teased, and you tease God by praying and praying. So, if God makes you wait, don't think that He isn't listening. Now, remember this, too. Sometimes you may ask God for something that is not good for you. You may think that the thing will be good for you, but God knows better. There are lots of things that are not good for you. Did you ever ask your mother to buy you a pocket knife with sharp blades? You thought you could have lots of fun with a pocket knife, but your mother knew that you might cut yourself. So your mother didn't buy it. Well, God works the same way. God may not give you what you want because He knows that a certain thing will harm you. God hears your prayers always, and He answers by giving you something that will be good for you. Children, no prayer is ever wasted. God knows what you want even before you ask. However, He wants you to ask. He wants you to pray. Remember, every prayer brings some kind of an answer. End of chapter 23. Chapter 24 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 24. More God. 2.5-year-old Terry Sowers had had a busy day. He had played hard and was very tired. When he finished his supper, it was time to go to bed. Terry's mother, however, was busy. So Terry's father decided that he would put the little boy to bed. This was something new for Terry, because on other nights his mother always carried him to bed. Terry rode on his father's shoulders 3 times around the room, and then they went upstairs, and in a short time the boy was in his little bed. His father hugged him and kissed him and covered the boy with his blanket. Then the father turned to leave the room. "Daddy," called the little boy, "get on the knees." Mr. Sowers smiled, turned, and knelt on his knees beside the bed. "Now, Daddy, put up the fingers," ordered the little fellow. The father obeyed. Joining his hands and bowing his head, the father prayed. He said an Our Father, a Hail Mary, and asked God to bless his son. When the father finished his prayers, what do you think Terry did? Pushing back the blanket, Terry knelt on his bed and held his hands together. "God bless Mama," he prayed out loud, "and Daddy and Grandma and Joe and Jean and my little dog Tuffy." Then Terry lay on his back and waited for his father to fix the blanket. The father smiled as once again he covered the boy. Once again Mr. Sowers turned to leave the room. But Terry had another idea. "Don't go," called the little boy. "More God, Daddy, more God." Terry wanted his father to stay with him a little while longer, and the father did what the little boy asked. Kneeling at the side of the bed, the father prayed to himself for a long time. When he arose, little Terry Sowers was sound asleep. Mr. Sowers tiptoed from the room, walked slowly down the stairs, sat in his favorite chair, and began to think. "More God, Daddy, more God." The boy wanted his father near him. Children, God is your Father. Like Terry Sowers, you should want your father to be near you, too. You should ask God, your Father, to stay with you at all times. If you ask Him, He won't refuse. You know, God likes children. He loves little boys and girls, and He wants little children to be near Him. Well, you can have God near you all through the day, but you have to call Him. You have to ask God to stay with you. Do you know what you have to do in order to have God near you at all times? Well, it's easy. All that you have to do is call upon God often during the day. Yes, say little prayers to God. Not long prayers, just short ones. Jesus, stay with me. Jesus, help me. Jesus, watch over me. All of these prayers are short prayers. Yes, and you can even make up prayers with your own words. Prayers don't have to come out of a book. Prayers from the heart are always best. Just show God that you are thinking about Him, that you want Him, that you need Him, and call God with your short prayers. You'll find that God will answer your prayers every time. Don't ever get the idea that you have to pray only in the morning and at night. Pray during the day. Why, you can say short prayers while walking down the street. You can say short prayers while you are playing. Remember, those short prayers take only a few seconds, and they don't have to be said out loud. Say them to yourself, and say hundreds of them every day. That's the way to keep God near you. Isn't it a fine thing to know that you can have God near you every minute of the day? You can have God with you in school and while you play. You can have God near you when things go wrong and when you are tempted. Yes, you can have God with you always, but you have to ask God to come, and you must ask Him often. In other words, you must pray. Pray little prayers, short prayers, and say them often. Children, get into the habit of saying short prayers every day. Say how many short prayers you can say today. Try to say more short prayers tomorrow, and keep up those short prayers day after day. That's the way to keep close to God. That's the way to have more God. End of chapter 24. Chapter 25 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. BRENNAN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 25. Keep ringing that bell. How would you like to live on top of a mountain? Well, I know some priests who live on the top of a mountain not very far from New York City. These priests, or monks as they are called, live on the mountain because it's quiet there, and they spend most of their time in prayer. Now these priests have a dog, a large brown dog by the name of Cinders, and I want to tell you about Cinders this morning. Cinders is a great favorite of the monks. He is one of the family, and the monks are very good to him. When the monks go to the chapel to pray, the dog sleeps in the kitchen. When the monks walk in the garden, Cinders is always with them. When the monks have their meals, the dog has his meals too. Every day at noon the cook rings a bell to call the priest to dinner, and every day Cinders waits for that bell to ring. When the dog hears the bell, he runs to the kitchen, and there he finds his noonday meal. Well, one day the bell didn't ring. Cinders waited and waited, but the bell didn't ring. The dog was hungry, and after some time he decided to go down to the kitchen. He looked for the cook, but the cook wasn't there. He went to his corner, but found no food. So there was nothing that the dog could do except to wait, and that's just what he did. Cinders waited and waited and waited. He was very, very hungry. The dog wanted that bell to ring. The dog wanted his dinner. Now there was one thing that Cinders didn't know. He didn't know that it was Good Friday. Good Friday, you know, is the day when Jesus died. And on Good Friday, monks never eat anything, and they pray most of the day. That was just what Cinders' friends were doing. They were keeping Good Friday. They were eating no meals that day. Cinders tried to sleep, but how can a dog sleep when he is hungry? Cinders listened for the bell that never rang, and he waited and waited. Finally, he could wait no longer. Now, what do you think Cinders did? The dog ran over to the bell, caught the rope in his teeth, and pulled with all his might. Did the bell ring? You bet it rang. The bell rang long and loud, and the monks rushed to the kitchen to see who was ringing the bell. And were they surprised? The monks saw their dog pulling the rope and ringing the bell, and they realized that the dog had not been fed. I suppose you are wondering whether the dog got his meal. Yes, yes. Even though it was Good Friday, the monks gave the dog a very special meal. And I think that the dog deserved it. Am I right? Now, why did I tell this story? I didn't tell it just to give you the idea of going around ringing a bell every time you were hungry. No, that was not my reason for telling the story. I told this story because the dog in the story reminds me of so many people. You know, Almighty God is very good to all of us. He gives us so many good things every single day. He gives us our parents, our families, our friends. God gives us health. He gives us food. He helps us with our work. Yes, God gives and gives every day. While God is so good, do you know that some people never think about God? Yes, that's true. Some people just take God for granted. They never think about God, and they never pray to Him. Day after day goes by, and they never say a prayer. But just let something happen to them. If they get sick or something goes wrong, then what do? That's the time they ring a bell. They say a prayer and expect God to answer right away. Yes, the only time some people pray is when they want something, and when they ring the bell, they want God to be listening. I hope that you children don't act that way. I hope that you never let a day go by without thinking about God. Don't ever let a day pass without saying some prayers. Even though you don't need anything special from God, be sure that you talk to Him every day. When God is good to you, thank Him. Then, when you need something, God will be right on the job to help you. Keep God on your side because you need Him every day. Don't forget that God takes care of His friends. He answers the prayers of His friends much quicker than He answers the prayers of strangers. Don't ever get the idea that you can get along without God. If you try to get along without God, you'll fail every time. So say your prayers every day. Pray every morning. Pray during the day. Pray again at night. Don't wait until you get into trouble. Children, every prayer is a bell that rings out in heaven, a bell that God always hears, a bell that God always answers. Keep ringing that bell. End of chapter 25. Chapter 26 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 26. The Child Apostle. Little Carolyn had many friends, but her closest friend was a girl by the name of Mary. Carolyn and Mary were such good friends that they spent most of their time together. The girls went to public school together, walked home together, played together, and ran errands together. There was one time, however, when Carolyn and Mary were never together. That was Sunday morning. Every Sunday Carolyn went to Mass, but Mary never went to church. Neither did Mary's parents nor her 5 brothers and sisters. Well, last spring Carolyn began going to the First Communion class, and Mary decided to go too. For 5 straight weeks the 2 little girls went to class every day. They listened to every word the priest spoke. One day, while the priest was telling the children about Jesus, he noticed that Mary was crying. "What's the matter, Mary?" asked the priest kindly. "Why are you crying?" Mary tried to hold back the tears, but she found it hard. "I feel bad inside," sobbed the little girl, "because I can't make my First Communion." The priest wondered, but asked no more questions. However, after class, the priest called Mary aside. The little girl's heart was almost broken, and she told the priest something that surprised him. Mary was not a Catholic. In fact, Mary wasn't anything. The priest knew now why Mary was sad. He told the little girl to pray hard, and perhaps something good would happen. Well, something good did happen. It happened that very night when the priest went to see Mary's mother. The priest told the mother that Mary could not receive Holy Communion because the little girl was not a Catholic. The mother nodded her head, and a tear trickled down her cheek. "Father," said Mary's mother, "I have something to tell you. Mary is the only one of my 7 children who has ever learned to pray. Don't you think it is time that Mary's father, mother, brothers, and sister learned how to pray too? We want to become Catholics." I don't have to tell you that the priest was happy. He was very happy. Twice a week for 4 months the priest taught Mary and her family about God. Yes, all of Mary's family learned to pray. And that isn't all. The priest baptized the parents and their 7 children. Is that the end of the story? No, children, it is not the end of the story. When Mary and her family received their first Holy Communion, watching and praying for them was little Carolyn, the girl who brought an entire family to God. Children, this story is a true story. Every word of it is true, and the priest in the story is a very good friend of mine. What did little Carolyn do to lead all of those people to God? Did she do something big? Not at all. Carolyn merely did what she thought was right. That's all. She went to church and to First Communion class. But when Mary saw Carolyn doing those things, she wanted to do them too. Carolyn's good example started everything. Carolyn's good example led 9 people to God. Would you like to lead someone to God? Would you like to help someone get to heaven? Of course you would. Well, all that you have to do is to show good example. You know, children, your friends watch you and they do whatever you do. If you are honest in your games, your friends will be honest too. If you tell the truth, your friends will tell the truth. If you obey your parents, your friends will want to obey their parents. If you go to confession on Saturday, watch your friends follow you. When you are in church, pray hard, and your friends, seeing you, will pray hard too. That's good example. Good example means that, by doing the right thing, you show others how to be good. It's easy, isn't it? Carolyn was just a little girl. She was only 8 years old. Yet she showed good example to her friend, and you can do the same thing. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you, by your good example, helped some boy or girl to love God? You may never know that you helped some boy or girl get to heaven, but some day God will tell you. Then you will be very happy. So let's start today. Help your friends to get closer to God. Show them good example. End of chapter 26. Chapter 27 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Rev. Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 27. The Little Black Dog. The other day I saw something very funny, something that caused plenty of excitement on a one-way street. I saw a long line of automobiles, and not one of them moved. They didn't move because they couldn't move. What happened? Listen, and I'll tell you the story. It was raining, and a bus driver was driving his bus through the rain. Suddenly, he put on the brakes and brought the big bus to a stop. The driver left his seat, looked under the bus, and did some loud talking. Finally, he shook his head. Something was wrong, and he needed help. The bus didn't move for more than an hour, and during all that time the cars behind the bus couldn't pass. People blew their horns and became very angry. But the driver would not move his bus. He told the crowd that gathered that there was nothing wrong with the bus. The bus was not broken. But there was something under the bus, and that something would have to be removed before the bus would go on its way. First of all, the firemen came. They looked under the bus and smiled. The firemen knew that they couldn't help, so they went back to the fire station. And the stalled bus stayed where it was, holding up traffic and making people angry. Finally, 5 men arrived in a large truck. They too looked under the bus, and when they saw what was holding up traffic, they laughed out loud. The men knew that there was only one thing to do, and they did it. They placed heavy chains under the front of the bus, and the men raised the front end. Then the bus driver crawled under the bus, and in a few moments was out again. Standing in the rain, the driver held in his arms the cause of all the trouble. What was it? Why, a little black dog. Yes, a little black dog had run under the bus to get out of the rain, and that little black dog stopped traffic for more than an hour. Many people were late for work just because a little black dog wanted to get out of the rain. Do you know, boys and girls, that very often little black dogs get into your souls? Yes, they do. And when those little black dogs get into your souls, they cause plenty of trouble. They tie up God's grace. They keep God's grace from getting into your souls. Why, little black dogs in your souls cause more trouble than the little black dog did the other morning. Now, what are the little black dogs that get into your souls? They are bad habits, and there are many of them. A bad temper, laziness, lying, stealing, cheating, swearing, disobedience. All these are bad habits. Bad habits are the little black dogs that stop you from going ahead. Little black dogs that keep God's grace from getting into your souls. What about your temper? Does your temper get you into lots of trouble? If it does, then it's a bad habit. Maybe you are lazy, and because of that bad habit, you don't say your prayers or you don't go to Mass. Perhaps you lie or cheat or steal. If you do, then you have bad habits. If you swear a great deal or say bad words, then you have a little black dog in your soul. If you don't obey, then disobedience is your bad habit. Oh, I could mention several more bad habits, but I don't think it is necessary. Anything that is wrong and that you keep doing over and over again is a bad habit. Now there is only one thing to do about a bad habit. Get rid of it. Every time you give in to a bad habit, you make a sin. And no one wants to make a sin. Remember, if you have a bad habit, you are bound to correct it. When you go to confession, you must promise God that you will try hard to stop the bad habit. If you want to get rid of your bad habits, the best way to do it is to make good habits. Obey your parents and teachers. Be honest when you play and talk. Be clean in your speech, and always tell the truth. Be kind to your friends, to your parents, to your brothers and sisters. Say your prayers every day. Go to Mass on Sunday. These are good habits, the habits that you should have, the habits that will not lead you into sin. Children, don't let any sin become a habit with you. Get rid of every bad habit. Don't let any little black dogs get into your soul. Remember, little black dogs hold up everything. Little black dogs keep you from going ahead. End of chapter 27. Chapter 28 of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 28. The Two Frogs. Butch and Greenie were two frogs that lived together in a large pool. Butch was the older frog, and Greenie was the younger. Now, Butch and Greenie were very good friends, and they had lots of fun in their lovely pool. They splashed in the cool water, chased each other, and played games. Sometimes they climbed on the rocks at the edge of the pool. Then, again, they hopped on the lily pads and enjoyed a rest in the warm sun. When children visited the pool, Butch and Greenie croaked their songs and tried to amuse their little friends. Yes, Butch and Greenie enjoyed life, and they were very happy. I said that the two frogs were happy. Yes, for a time they were very happy. Then, one day, Butch had an idea. "Let's leave the pool and go up and visit the farm," he urged the younger frog. Little Greenie didn't like the idea. He was afraid. "Suppose we get into trouble?" he asked. Butch laughed at the foolish question. "Oh, we won't get into any trouble," he promised. "Come on, let's go." Well, the two frogs hopped out of the water and started for the farm. Butch led the way through the tall wet grass, and Greenie hopped along after him. Now and then the frogs stopped to rest, and after a long time they finally reached the barn. They looked through the door and they saw many strange things. Now, Butch and Greenie had never seen a barn. Of course, they were curious. They wanted to see everything. So they hopped around, looked at everything, and no one disturbed them. "Gee, I'm thirsty," said Greenie after a little while. "Where can we get a drink?" Butch saw a large tub in the corner of the barn. He thought that there might be water in the tub. So he hopped up on a board and looked into the tub. The tub was empty. There was no water. Butch was disappointed, and so was his friend. The two frogs then hopped across the floor in search of water. I might just as well tell you that the frogs found no water, but they did find a pail, and next to the pail was a small wooden box. The two frogs hopped up on the box and looked into the pail. What a surprise! "Why, that's cream in the pail," said Butch to his friend. "We're going to have a party." Butch hopped into the pail of cream and Greenie followed him. For a few moments the frogs did have a party, and they liked the cream. Then they swam and splashed and had lots of fun. When the fun was over, however, Butch and Greenie found that the sides of the pail were steep and slippery. They tried and tried to climb out of the pail, but each time they tried, the two frogs fell deep into the rich cream. For some time Butch and Greenie swam in the cream. Many times they tried to climb out of the pail, but each time they failed. Finally, tired and weak, little Greenie could stand it no longer. "I give up!" he cried as he sank to the bottom of the pail and was drowned. Butch, however, didn't give up. He fought hard and swam and splashed. And what do you think? All of a sudden Butch found himself sitting on a large lump of butter. For some time he sat there on the butter and rested. Then he hopped with all his might, and, sure enough, Butch hopped right out of the pail. He lost no time getting back to his home in the pond. Butch was safe because he refused to give up. Has this story a lesson? I think it has. You know, we are all trying to get to heaven, and we have to work for heaven every day. Too many boys and girls, however, act just like Greenie. When things go wrong and they fall into sin, they throw up their hands and cry out, "I give up!" That's where they make a mistake. What they should do is go to confession and start working again. The boy or girl who works for heaven every day will certainly be saved. I like boys and girls who act like Butch. When temptations come, they fight hard and never give up. They keep away from persons, places, and things that will lead them into sin. If they do slip and fall into sin, they pick themselves up and go to confession. They pray every day. They receive Holy Communion often. These boys and girls are working hard to save their souls. They never quit. They never give up. Children, you can't take it easy and expect to save your soul. You must work hard for heaven, and you must never quit. Keep saying your prayers. Go to Mass and receive the sacraments often. If you do these things, you will never be sorry, and you'll save your soul. Don't be like Greenie. Don't give up. Don't be a quitter. End of chapter 28. End of Just for Juniors, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan.